Chapter 11-19. Long Fei Yi gave the Shadow Guard 5 days to deploy. First of all, it would take some time to dispatch the Shadow Guard, and second of all, this deployment would be different from any of the previous ones. This time they had to be extra careful. If even the slightest bit of information was leaked, the consequences would be unbearable. Of course, during these 5 days, Long Fei Yi and the others didn't idle around. Because even though they knew that the person was imprisoned in Fengming Mountain, the mountain was so big that they still needed to investigate the exact location. Long Fei Yi and Gu had both gone to Fengming Mountain to look for the person, but they couldn't find any trace of the person. This was enough to show that Bai Yanqing was well hidden. There must be a secret place in Fengming Mountain that they didn't know about. Brother, let's send people to guard all the gynecology and obstetrics clinics within 100 miles. As long as Bai Yanqing sends people to get the medicine, we'll be able to catch him. Tang Li suggested. If they waited for the doctor in the pharmacy to finish writing the prescription and send it over, the person who went to get the medicine would have already gone far away. The best way was to wait. Gu immediately objected. No, we can't do that. If we catch the person and bring him back, it'll be over if he doesn't confess. Even the most carefree Gu Qishao had turned cautious and careful. If they caught the person who went to get the medicine, they wouldn't be able to find out where Bai Yanqing was hiding. If Bai Yanqing couldn't wait for the person who went to get the medicine, then all their efforts would be in vain. Then we'll follow the person who went to get the medicine. Tang Li said anxiously. Who's going to follow? What if we're discovered? Can you guarantee that nothing will go wrong? Gu retorted. The person who went to get the medicine was very cunning. He didn't go to a fixed pharmacy to get the medicine. Last time he went out of Medical City to get the medicine. Who knew where he would go this time? With their martial arts skills, they wouldn't be discovered if they followed the person, but how were they supposed to set up an ambush without knowing where the person was going? If the Shadow Guard set up an ambush, it'd be fine if someone like Su Donglin or Chu Shifeng ran into the person. But if it was a regular Shadow Guard, it'd be easy to spot. At a time like this, Bai Yanqing's men had to have extraordinary martial arts and poison skills. Before they could come up with a better idea, the best thing they could do was to hold back their troops for now. Seeing Tang Li's defeated expression, Long Fei Yi finally spoke up. Cold, he said, last night I've already sent down orders. Su Donglin and Chu Shifeng are already leading 10 experts to hide at all the entrances to Clear Breeze Peak. Over the next few days they'll report to me if anyone comes in or out. Gu and Tang Li both looked at him in disbelief. Gu Beiyue sat on one side with a helpless smile. He wasn't surprised at all. Big bro, how did you come up with this idea? Amazing. Really amazing. Tang Li was pleasantly surprised. What did it mean to wait for rabbits by a stump? This was the real deal. Sending a bunch of people to stand guard at the various pharmacies was full of uncontrollable factors. Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin, on the other hand, had 10 experts to guard the entrance to Clear Breeze Peak and wait for the right moment. That was much more reliable. Even if they couldn't track anyone, they'd at least know they'd come from Clear Breeze Peak. Tang Li had prostrated himself before his big bro since he was young, much less now. As for Gu, even if he approved of Long Fei Yi, he wouldn't say it out loud. He looked at Long Fei and pursed his lips before withdrawing his gaze. Are there different levels of intelligence? He mused inwardly. 5 days could be said to be long, but it could also be said to be short. On the first and second day they busied themselves with setting up defenses and reading up on all sorts of records about Clear Breeze Peak. On the third day, Chu Tianyin brought over 10 driving arrow experts from the Nether clan. Although Western Zhou had already retreated, Chu Tianyin only had 100 or so archers under his command after the betrayal and chaos of war. This was the last of the Nether clan's strength. Long Fei Yi had him pick out 10 or so driving arrow experts as reinforcements. In addition, Long Fei Yi had Tianshan Kenzo send over a group of sword experts as well. Since Bai Yanqing didn't want to fight them head-on and only wanted to stall for time, it was very likely that Bai Yanqing would continue to flee as soon as he discovered they'd broken into Clear Breeze Peak. The outer perimeter of Clear Breeze Peak was their last line of defense. Even if they couldn't trap Bai Yanqing for them, they could at least stall for time. Chu Tianyin strode in and cupped his fists in greeting Long Fei Yi. Your Highness. Leaving aside whether or not the 2 imprisoned Chu clan elders had pledged allegiance to Long Fei Yi, Chu Tianyin had done so long ago. Sit, Long Fei Yi said. Chu Tianyin sat down next to Gu Beiyue and murmured, Brother Gu, long time no see. It's a good thing we can still meet, Gu Beiyue murmured back. His words revealed the grudges and grievances between the Nether and Shadow clans over the past few years. Long Fei Yi and Chu Tianyin discussed the deployment of the Shadow Guard, so Chu Tianyin knew what to do with his archers. He hadn't found out anything about the Li clan's schemes in Western Zhou, nor did he have the face to ask Long Fei Yi to see his father and uncle. He could only withdraw for now. By the fourth day the Shadow Guard was in place. Tang Li's new batch of concealed weapons, the fire crossbows, were also in place. Everything was ready to go. On the morning of the fifth day, Chu Shifeng personally came with good news. Your Highness, there's been a situation in the pine forest west of Clearbreeze Peak. A black-robed man came out of the woods and went down the mountain. This subordinate didn't dare chase after him, Chu Shifeng reported excitedly. Not chasing after him was the safest and wisest thing to do, because it was very likely that the man had gone down the mountain to get medicine. As long as he did that, he'd definitely come back up the mountain. Excellent. Long Fei Yi rose to his feet, a cold smile on his lips. Immediately after, Gu Beiyue, Gu and Tang Li rose to their feet as well. Finally, it was their turn to wait for the heir to show up. Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue, Gu and Tang Li immediately headed for Clearbreeze Peak, leaving Chu Shifeng to wait for news at the medical academy. The four of them didn't stick together, but spread out on the four paths leading up Clearbreeze Peak. However, what was surprising was that they waited from morning till night, but they did not see a single person. Chu Shifeng didn't receive any news from the medical academy either. If the man had gone to get medicine outside the city, then he might not be back by the end of the night. Thus they continued to wait. However, even after waiting until the evening of the next day, there was still no news at all. Everyone was still very calm and continued to keep watch without batting an eyelid. But on the third evening there was still no news. By now Gu and Tang Li were starting to lose their cool. Gu slipped away to find Gu Beiyue and said, "That person shouldn't have gone to get medicine. If we keep watching we might as well go up the mountain to search." This was the first time Gu Beiyue had been so serious with Gu. "Cold," he said, "Seventh young master, don't be careless. Hurry and go back to keep watch. If you lose track of him you'll have to bear the consequences." Gu was about to explain himself when Gu Beiyue knitted his brows. "Go back." Gu had no choice but to go back the way he'd come. At the same time Tang Li ran to Long Fei Yi. Before he could speak, Long Fei Yi gave him a single word, "Scram." Tang Li didn't even dare to explain himself, but went back with his tail between his legs. The four of them and the Shadow Guard waited for an entire night. But on the fourth day, a black figure appeared in Gu Beiyue's line of sight. The sky was dim and the light wasn't good. Moreover, the figure was quite far away, so Gu Beiyue couldn't see clearly. But he was certain that the man was heading deeper into the forest. "Tell His Highness and the others that I'll chase after him if there's any movement." "Everyone stay calm," Gu Beiyue said in a low voice before silently following the figure. Letting Gu Beiyue chase after the person was the safest bet. Gu Beiyue was not only fast but his figure was also like a ghost. Even Bai Yanqing might not be able to find him. When this news reached Long Fei Ye's ears, Long Fei Ye's tense face finally relaxed a little. The Shadow Guard beside him also breathed a sigh of relief. For the past 3 days, following beside His Highness was the same as staying in a large ice cellar. They were constantly hoping that the princess would bring the little master who was still in his mother's womb back to melt the ice mountain that was His Highness. Long Fei Yi was absolutely assured that Gu Beiyue would do something. Sure enough, after 4 hours, Gu Beiyue returned. He whispered to Long Fei Yi, "We'll talk when we get back." Long Fei Yi left without another word. Tang Li and Gu quickly left after receiving the Shadow Guard's orders, returning to the medical academy. "There's a hole in a tree halfway up the mountain. That person jumped in through it," Gu Beiyue said seriously. "The underground palace." Long Fei Yi blurted out. There were 2 large mountain ranges in the Poison Sect's Forbidden Grounds. One was Clearbreeze Mountain while the other was Monarch's Descent Mountain. Between these 2 mountains was where the Poison Sect's sacrificial altar was located. It was a very deep ravine and a very dense forest. They had already destroyed Monarch's Descent Mountain's underground palace. When they had entered Monarch's Descent Mountain's underground palace, they had also entered through a hole in a large tree. From the looks of it, Clearbreeze Mountain was the same as Monarch's Descent Mountain. There was also an underground palace hidden within the enormous mountain. At this moment the shadow guard arrived with a prescription. Young Master Beiyue, this came from the maternity clinic in the Acropolis 25 li away. Gu Beiyue glanced at it and picked out a medicine that had been used incorrectly. It was called cassia seed. If they hadn't made their previous conjectures, they probably would have wasted a lot of time and effort. But with their previous conjectures and today's discovery, they all knew that the Ming in cassia seed was the Ming of Clear Breeze Mountain. Everyone thought that this prescription was meaningless, but Gu Beiyue still managed to pick up on something. He said, although the 3 prescriptions use different ingredients, their effects are the same. The princess must be fine now and doesn't need to take any medicine. Otherwise, with 4th young Miss Ren's abilities, she wouldn't have been able to prescribe 3 different prescriptions in a row. This piece of news was more delightful than anything else. Long Fei Ye's heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally calmed down. Brother, let's kill our way over right now. Tang Li was extremely excited. Gu Qishao stood up and said, call everyone over and surround the entire mountain for this old man. That's right. Why don't we wait a few more days? I'll call everyone from the Tang sect over. Tang Li said in a hurry. In terms of excitement, Long Fei Yi was probably the most agitated. However, he still managed to keep his cool. He ignored Tang Li and Gu and said seriously, if it's the underground palace, there must be another entrance. Chapter 11:20. As soon as Long Fei Yi finished speaking, Gu Beiyue interjected, it should be on top of the cliff. Your Highness, I'll go with you tonight to investigate. The agitated Gu finally remembered how he, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had been forced to the edge of a cliff in order to escape the fire. They'd almost fallen into the abyss. That was the first time in his life that someone had stayed by his side. He finally calmed down. Saving people didn't just require hot-bloodedness but a calm heart as well. Find all the exits and block them all. Gu ordered cold. This guy isn't the least bit stupid when he calms down. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue had the exact same idea. Even if they sent all their men to surround Clear Breeze Peak, it still wasn't safe. After all, the mountain was too big to guard against. But if they could find all the exits of the underground palace and set up an ambush, they'd be able to do twice the work with half the effort. That night, Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue personally went to the Black Forest where the Poison Sect's sacrificial altar was and flew up to the cliff face of Clear Breeze Peak. Only people of Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue's caliber could fly up such a tall, impenetrable wall. On one hand, they had to be on guard against being discovered. On the other, they had to search for hidden caves and cliffs. They spent the whole night searching the immeasurably tall cliff that stretched for almost 1,000 meters and found that there was only one exit on the cliff. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue didn't return to Medical City. Instead, they had Gu and Tang Li come with them. Tang Li, you and Gu Beiyue will go in through this cave. Gu and I will go up the mountain and enter through the tree hole. Remember, move out as soon as the sun rises. Long Fei Yi instructed. Although Tang Li's martial arts were average compared to theirs, Tang Li had plenty of hidden weapons that were impossible to guard against. Moreover, Ning Jing was here, so he had to save her personally. Long Fei Yi wasn't worried about leaving Tang Li to Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue's speed at evading attacks and escaping was unparalleled. It was impossible for him to hurt Bai Yanqing on his own, but it wouldn't be easy for Bai Yanqing to hurt or poison him either. Long Fei wasn't familiar with poisons, but with an undying Gu Qishao by his side, it was enough to deal with Bai Yanqing's poisons. If they ran into Bai Yanqing, Gu would be in charge of keeping Bai Yanqing busy while he went to save the others. Splitting up was also a safety precaution. After all, both entrances could be guarded. If they were discovered, Bai Yanqing would be hard-pressed to deal with 2 people at once. As long as one of them kept Bai Yanqing busy, the other pair would have a chance to save the others or even launch a sneak attack. Long Fei also instructed Chu Shifeng to wait until daybreak for them to make their move. Then he'd immediately deploy all of his men at the foot of the mountain to lie in ambush at the 2 entrances, while maintaining the ambush outside Medical City. He left Tang Li to Gu Beiyue while he and Gu circled around the mountain. They snuck all the way to the tree hole that Gu Beiyue had discovered and set up an ambush. There were only 2 hours left before the sun rose. These 2 hours were the dark night before the arrival of the common people. For the 4 of them, this was the longest wait they'd ever had. For Long Fei Yi, What he was waiting for was Han Yunxi's confident smile and the little fellow in Han Yunxi's womb that he'd been waiting for the most. For Gu Beiyue, what he was waiting for was the accusation on his shoulders and the protection in his heart. For Gu, what he was waiting for was the phrase, poison lass. For Tang Li, what he was waiting for was a confession that he owed Ning Jing a long time ago. A confession that he and Ning Jing shared the truest words between them. What were Han Yunxi and the rest doing now? Han Yunxi had already woken up. Although fourth young Miss Ren said she could get out of bed now, she was still very cautious and continued to lie flat all day. During the 3 months in the dark room, she hadn't been able to cultivate her poison storage space at all. She hadn't even been able to sense Lil Thing's existence. However, ever since she'd spread the news, she'd felt much more at ease. These days she'd been lying down with nothing to do, so she'd been cultivating with her eyes closed. As soon as she calmed down, she'd immediately sense Lil Thing's existence and could even feel Lil Thing's irritable mood. Actually, there wasn't much room for improvement even if she cultivated now. She just wanted to cultivate a little more so that she could be a little closer to advancing. What was the turning point for advancement? Fourth young Miss Ren had been anxious at first, but after a few days she'd gotten used to life here and was now sound asleep. Ning Jing was locked up alone in a secret room. Previously, Su Xiaoyu had cheated by yanching out of good food and a lot of nourishing herbs. If she hadn't rested for a few days, who knew if she would have died in the forest at Tiger's prison. Later, Bai Yanqing found out that Su Xiaoyu didn't know the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion, and the two of them had almost been killed. Even with a knife on their necks, Su Xiaoyu still believed that Bai Yanqing wouldn't kill them. She didn't understand at the time, but now it seemed that Bai Yanqing had already planned to kidnap Han Yunxi back then. He'd wanted to use the two of them to threaten Han Yunxi to be obedient. Although she was still alive, she was still very weak. She couldn't even stand for a little longer. She'd faint and her legs were especially sore. She leaned against the corner and gently licked her teeth. She was extremely disappointed. She'd almost forgotten how she'd dressed up as a man before she got married, and how high-spirited she'd been. However, she didn't regret meeting Tang Li, nor did she regret giving birth to Tang Li's daughter. Apart from missing Tang Li, she missed her daughter even more. She'd only held her daughter a few times ever since she'd been born. Newborns were different every day. It had already been a few months. What had her daughter become? Could it be that she couldn't recognize her? Had her daughter started to recognize people? Did she still remember being hugged and fed by her mother? Did she still remember that she had a mother? Every night Ning Jing's mind would appear that tender little face. She couldn't help but cry. She cried until her heart, liver, spleen, lungs and kidneys were broken. Su Xiaoyu was actually locked up next to Ning Jing's. The stone room was sealed so she couldn't hear Ning Jing's cries. She also didn't know that Ning Jing was right next to her. Compared to Ning Jing's disappointment, she was in a very good state. She firmly believed that her master had the ability to send the news out. At the same time, she'd begun to think about how to use Bai Yanqing's immortal body to research new torture methods after capturing Bai Yanqing. She wouldn't be satisfied until she'd researched hundreds and thousands of torture methods. Of course, before researching new torture methods, she had to let Ning Jing take her revenge and let Bai Yanqing have a taste of having his teeth pulled out. With Su Xiaoyu's temper and personality, there was no telling if anyone would dare to marry her when she grew up. In this underground palace there were two other people who were imprisoned. One was Mu Qinggu while the other was Duan Mu Yao. Ever since Mu Qinggu was kidnapped, he'd been locked up in 3 different places before ending up in this underground palace. Even now he had no idea who had kidnapped him, or that Cloud Realm continent had already experienced war and peace. Nor did he know that his Mu family was a descendant of the Li clan. Because of their past mistakes and his father's wrath, the Li clan had been destroyed by the Long Fei Yi. Now, even the Li clan members who'd escaped didn't dare to reveal their identities for fear of becoming public enemies. Mu Qinggu had lived a magnanimous, independent and upright life. If he knew the cruel truth and the unbearable past of his own clan, how would he feel? Besides the people who delivered his 3 meals a day, no one else had come to visit him since he was imprisoned. He'd asked countless times who his kidnappers were and why, but the people who delivered his meals never said a word. After so long, he almost felt like a hostage who'd been forgotten by the kidnappers. That's right, Mu Qinggu had lost all value to Bai Yanqing. Fortunately, he was forgotten. Otherwise, Bai Yanqing would have ordered people to cut off all 3 meals a day. Mu Qinggu would have starved to death. Duanmu Yao had been forgotten as well. If she had any brains at all, she wouldn't have handed third honored elder over to Bai Yanqing. Unfortunately, she had no brains at all. Now that the heretical sword sect had been destroyed and Celestial Mountain restored order, what use did she have to Bai Yanqing? After she handed third honored elder over to Bai Yanqing and her men in the capital kidnapped Mu Qinggu, she became one of Bai Yanqing's discarded pawns. When Bai Yanqing locked up Han Yunxi in this underground palace, she stupidly asked Bai Yanqing to hand over Han Yunxi to her. From then on, she was locked up in a secret room. No matter how much she kicked up a fuss, Bai Yanqing never saw her again. If Bai Yanqing hadn't forgotten about her, she would have starved to death long ago. She didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse that she hadn't starved to death. Currently, Bai Yanqing was drinking wine with Hao San in the stone room next to Han Yunxi's room. Master, what do you plan to do once Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi turn against each other? Hao San had been hiding this question in his heart for a long time. His master had lived his entire life for the sake of love and hatred, but he'd never made any plans for himself. Bai Yanqing didn't reply, but poured the entire cup of wine into his mouth before slamming it against the stone table. Although he ignored Hao San, the man's question stirred up great waves in his heart. After taking revenge on Mu Xan's daughter and Mu Xan, what then? What else could he do? If he didn't die or perish, where would he go in the endless years to come? Hao San hesitated for a long time before he probed. Master, once Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi kill each other and die, there'll be no master left in this world. Hao San had always hoped that his master could seize the world so he could enjoy a high official's salary, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank above all others. Hao San's hint was so obvious, but it was a pity that Bai Yanqing didn't take it to heart. He sneered, only a masterless world is interesting. A masterless world would be a world of war, destitute and homeless, plagues, where the people had no way to make a living. A trace of helplessness flashed past Hao San's eyes, but he didn't make a sound. At this moment the sky outside was already bright and the sun had risen. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue and Tang Li entered the underground palace almost at the same time. Not long after they entered the underground palace, they met with the first obstacle, which was exactly the same. This obstacle was Chapter 1121. The obstacle Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue, and Tang Li encountered was none other than the same formation that trapped them last time. As soon as they jumped into the tree hole, Gu sensed that something was wrong after walking a short distance. He said, "It's the 10-sided ambush formation." Because he was tricked by the art of Qimen Duanjiao last time, Gu specifically went to learn this secret technique. Although he did not learn it for a long time, his skill level was not bad. At least he could distinguish the type of formation within 100 steps. Once he identified the formation, he could start looking for a way to break it. Gu stopped Long Fei Yi. "Don't go. It'll be futile even if you continue." Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi did not stop. Instead, he continued walking forward. He said, "The southwest direction is the Death Gate. The 10-sided ambush formation has 91 life gates. The Death Gate is the life gate. It's the exit." As soon as he said this, Gu was stunned. The art of Qimen Duanjiao had 8 gates. They were rest, life, injury, limit, view, death, alarm, and open. The corresponding array formations also had these 8 doors in 8 directions. Different dangers were hidden in the 8 directions. Generally speaking, the opening, rest, and life gates were auspicious. The death, alarm, and injury gates were ominous. The limit gate and view gate were neutral. Those who knew this secret technique might not be able to break the formation because they would often make mistakes in judgment and mistake the death gate for the life gate. Once they walked in, the consequences would be unimaginable. And some tricky formations would reverse life and death. Life was death and death was life. Gu was puzzled. When did Long Fei Yi learn the art of Qimen Duanjiao and the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation? Hadn't he been killing enemies on the battlefield for the past 3 months? He was actually better at learning than him. They had only walked a short distance and he could already tell that the death gate was the life gate. Gu was stunned in place. Long Fei Yi had already walked far away. He did not answer or stop. Instead he said sternly, "Hurry up." In a formation, the most taboo thing was to separate. Last time they had suffered a great loss because they had accidentally separated. Just as Long Fei Yi and Gu came out of the gate of life of the formation, Gu Beiyue and Tang Li also came out of the formation. Gu Beiyue also went to learn the art of Qimen Duanjia. His level should be on par with Long Fei Yi. Just as they were breaking the array, Bai Yanqing immediately sensed that the array had been broken. He stood up in shock and said coldly, "Someone broke in." Last night when the attendant came back with the medicine, he personally changed the arrays at the two entrances. Now that both arrays were broken, it proved that someone had broken into both entrances. "Master, who has such great ability to break your array?" Hao Sam was also very surprised. He added, "Long Fei Yi and the others don't know Qimen Duanjia." Bai Yanqing had considered this point as well, but who else could find this place besides them? Did they come here on purpose or by mistake? Although Bai Yanqing was shocked, he didn't panic. Even if they broke the array at the entrance, they might not be able to find their way here. If they came down from the tree hole, they would have to pass through a massive maze. If they came down from the cliff, they would have to face over 20 different paths. If they chose the right path, they'd reach this place. If they chose the wrong one, they'd end up in a maze. The reason he chose Clear Breeze Peak as his hiding place was because it had the most convenient conditions. It had the largest maze in all of Cloud Realm continent. This was the most hidden area of the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds. Bai Yanqing was still waiting calmly. He was more willing to believe that someone had broken in by mistake, because he refused to believe that Long Fei Yi and the others could learn Qimen Duanjia in such a short time, much less break through his own array. But soon enough the attendant rushed in to report, "Master, it's Long Fei Yi and the others. They found their way here." Bai Yanqing was truly stunned by the news. "Who broke the array? Who?" he asked loudly. Qimen Duanjia was the foundation of the Wind Clan's foundation. It was their most proficient secret. Outsiders could learn Qimen Duanjia, but very few could break through the Wind Clan's arrays. How did Long Fei Yi and the others do it? Long Fei Yi and Gu are together. They came down from the tree hole and have already entered the maze. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li are together. They came in from the cliff and are still standing at the entrances to the 20 paths. This subordinate doesn't know who broke the array either, the attendant reported. Bai Yanqing was shocked by the news, but he quickly shifted his attention from the array to the prescription. It had been 3 months, but Long Fei Yi and the others still hadn't found their way here. Only after the prescription had been sent out did they find their way. It was obvious that the prescription was the one who sent out the news. He walked out of the stone room angrily and personally pushed open the door to the room where Han Yunxi was locked up. Han Yunxi had just sat up with the help of fourth young Miss Ren. She was stunned when she saw Bai Yanqing rushing in with a furious expression. Then she held fourth young Miss Ren's hand tightly and thought to herself, "Oh no." It seemed that the prescription had been discovered. Bai Yanqing wouldn't do anything to her, but fourth young Miss Ren was in danger. "Stupid girl, you're so capable." Bai Yanqing walked closer. Han Yunxi got off the bed and shielded fourth young Miss Ren behind her. She glanced at the open stone door and prepared to escape with fourth young Miss Ren. If they didn't escape, fourth young Miss Ren would definitely die here. If Bai Yanqing was willing to talk to her in the small dark room, she would have found a chance to escape long ago. But now she had to be careful with fourth young Miss Ren. It was impossible to say that she wasn't panicking. However, no matter how panicked she was, she forced herself to calm down and think of a solution in the face of fourth young Miss Ren, who had helped her a lot. "Tell me, how did you send out the news?" Bai Yanqing questioned angrily. Han Yunxi was shocked when she heard this. She originally thought that Bai Yanqing had discovered the word game on the prescription, but after hearing what Bai Yanqing said, he didn't decipher the word game. So Long Fei Yi and the rest had found their way here? Han Yunxi could suppress her panic, but she couldn't suppress her ecstasy. Long Fei Yi and the rest had finally arrived. She knew that he would definitely be able to decipher the word game. He definitely could. It was this piece of good news that made Han Yunxi even more determined to escape from this secret room. She held fourth young Miss Ren with one hand and covered her lower abdomen with the other as she faced Bai Yanqing, who was approaching her step by step. She thought anxiously, "What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Tell me." Bai Yanqing was furious. He had been fooled again. If he hadn't been cautious and set up arrays at both entrances, he might not have known that Long Fei Yi and the rest had sneaked in. Han Yunxi had an idea and replied, "That's the method my father taught me." Actually, Han Yunxi didn't know whether her biological father had passed away or not. She had no choice but to take a gamble. If her biological father had passed away, then she would have to think of another way. If her biological father hadn't passed away, then this would be an excellent way to provoke Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing had pretended to be her biological father and had a lot of resentment towards her mother. If she guessed correctly, Bai Yanqing and her mother must have had some sort of love and hate entanglement. Only love could confuse a person's heart, and only hatred could destroy a person's heart. Her biological father was Bai Yanqing's love rival, so everything about her biological father was Bai Yanqing's greatest weakness. Han Yunqi's heart was in her throat. If she made the wrong bet, she really didn't know what else she could use to provoke Bai Yanqing. Fourth young Mistress Ren hid behind Han Yunqi. Although she didn't know what was going on, she could clearly feel Han Yunqi's nervousness. Bai Yanqing suddenly stopped in his tracks. Han Yunqi's heart skipped a beat and she became even more nervous. Her palms were sweating. Bai Yanqing narrowed his eyes and stared at Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi clenched her fists and forced herself to stay calm. She looked at him calmly and fearlessly. "You father." Bai Yanqing finally spoke. Han Yunqi couldn't figure out what he was questioning in his tone. Was he questioning whether she was lying, or questioning the word game that her father had taught her in the prescription? Han Yunqi didn't know the situation and didn't dare to answer carelessly. She stared vigilantly at Bai Yanqing and confronted him. Unexpectedly, Bai Yanqing suddenly sneered. No wonder you don't believe that I'm your father." Han Yunqi was overjoyed when she heard this. It seemed that she had made the right bet again. Although she didn't know whether Bai Yanqing knew about her father's whereabouts or whether he was alive. However, she had already hooked Bai Yanqing. She took out a piece of jade from her sleeve, held it tightly in her hand and raised it high. "Bai Yanqing, make a guess. Where did this 10,000-year-old corpse jade come from?" she asked with a sneer. The real corpse jade had already been melted into a poisonous teardrop by her perplexing butterfly illusion. It was given to her by the Mu family's Madame Lianxin. Madame Mu Xin had given it to Madame Lianxin in order to help Hong Kongan become a director of the medical academy. Madame Lianxin had wanted to use this piece of 10,000-year-old corpse jade to blackmail her and lie to her that she knew her father's identity. In reality, Madame Lianxin only knew that this piece of corpse jade was a love token that Han Yunqi's father had given to Mu Xin. She didn't know anything else. Because the corpse jade was a direct descendant of the poison sect, Madame Lianxin had deduced that Han Yunqi had the poison sect's bloodline. Han Yunqi didn't know who her father was, much less the relationship between him and Bai Yanqing. However, she was certain that her father was also a direct descendant of the poison sect, so he might be related to Bai Yanqing by blood. Between the two of them, who had the right to inherit the position of the poison sect's sect head? Something as good as the 10,000-year-old corpse jade had to be in the hands of the sect head. Bai Yanqing would definitely recognize the 10,000-year-old corpse jade. Han Yunqi wrapped the jade completely in her palms so that not a speck of it was exposed. However, the name 10,000-year-old corpse jade was enough to drive Bai Yanqing crazy. "Great. So this thing ended up in your hands?" Bai Yanqing roared. Han Yunqi's eyes flashed cunningly as she snorted. "This is a love token my father gave my mother, so it's only natural that it ended up in my hands. When I see Long Fei Yi, I'll give it to him." Bai Yanqing wanted her to turn against Long Fei Yi, right? Then she'll show him how lovey-dovey they are. That's old man's thing. Give it back to old man. Bai Yanqing suddenly roared in rage. Han Yunqi knew that her chance had come. She grabbed fourth young Miss Ren's hand and sent the jade flying into the bed. "I won't give it to you even if it's ruined." Bai Yanqing didn't even think as he lunged forward to snatch it. At the same time, Han Yunqi pulled fourth young Miss Ren out of the stone room as fast as she could. Chapter 11:22. By the time Han Yunqi pulled fourth young Miss Ren out of the stone room, Bai Yanqing had already thrown himself onto the bed to grab the jade, only to discover that it wasn't the 10,000-year corpse jade at all. "Stop her!" Bai Yanqing roared, then turned to chase after her. But Han Yunqi had already crippled Hao Sen's legs with her poison and was running towards the dark passage on the right. The light was coming from the left, which meant that they would reach a cliff if they went left. Below that cliff was very likely the Black Forest where the poison sect's sacrificial altar was. Han Yunqi had realized this as soon as she'd been brought out of the little black room. But this time she didn't hesitate to run to the right. She'd already made all sorts of plans when she was locked in the stone room. She'd seriously considered which direction to run in if she could escape. The left looked beautiful, but it was incomparably dangerous. Bai Yanqing definitely wouldn't trap them so close to the exit. Just because they could see the light didn't mean they could escape easily. In fact, it meant danger was close by. She guessed that Bai Yanqing must have set up an array on the left. She didn't want to be trapped again as soon as she escaped. Her smartest choice was to go right. As long as she wasn't trapped, she'd have a chance to escape. If Clear Breeze Mountain's underground palace was similar to Monarch's Descent Mountains, then the other exit should be upwards through the tree hole. Han Yunxi killed 5 or 6 guards with her poison before quickly disappearing into the darkness. By the time Bai Yanqing chased after her, she was already nowhere to be seen. He was about to give chase when Hao San grabbed his leg. "Master, save me." Hao San was both skilled in martial arts and poison, but he was no match for Han Yunxi. He just exchanged a blow with Han Yunxi and was immediately injured by her poison needles. The poison was so painful that he couldn't stand. He didn't know what kind of poison it was, but he knew that not only would his legs be crippled, but all the bones in his body would be crippled. In the end, he wouldn't be able to escape death. He could only hope that his master would cure him of the poison. Scram. Bai Yanqing was angry and anxious. How could he care about Hao San? Who knew that Hao San would not let go of him? He was not hugging his master but his own life. If he loosened his grip, he would lose his life. Scram. Do you hear me? Bai Yanqing roared as he stared at the darkness to his right, his heart burning with anxiety. Long Fei Yi and the others had already entered the maze. If the two of them bumped into them, he would have to expend a lot of effort to bring them away. He could not die, but that did not mean that he could not feel pain or injuries. He was very clear that there was a huge gap between his martial arts and Long Fei Yi's. "Master, this old servant has followed you and your family for many years. Even if I have not made any contributions, I have worked hard." This old servant. Before Hao San could finish speaking, Bai Yanqing's palm struck down on his head. Useless thing. Blood immediately flowed out from Hao San's scalp and flowed down his face. Hao San never thought that he would end up like this. But he should have thought of it earlier, shouldn't he? Hadn't Jun Yixia and Bai Yuqiao followed Bai Yanqing for so many years? They had followed him since they were young. Weren't they still kicked away by Bai Yanqing? This person was crazy and had no humanity to speak of. Raising his head to look at Bai Yanqing, Jun Yixia's face suddenly appeared in Hao San's mind. He finally regretted it. The person he should have been most loyal to was not Bai Yanqing but Jun Yixia. If he had been enlightened at that time, he would not have ended up in this state today. Everything would have been different. Even though he was seriously injured, Hao San did not let go of Bai Yanqing's leg. He hugged it tightly and raised his head to look at Bai Yanqing. No wonder Mu Exen did not want you that year. Bai Yanqing was enraged. When he heard this, he suddenly bent down and grabbed Hao San's collar. He pulled him up fiercely and questioned, "Why? What do you mean? Tell me. Why did she not want me? Tell me. Tell me." Blood continued to flow down. Hao San's entire face was covered in blood. Coldly he smiled. As he smiled, his smile stopped and his expression froze. Dead? Bai Yanqing was suddenly stunned. He seemed to have just realized that Hao San was dead. He had killed him with his own hands. Hao San had followed him for more than 30 years, right? When he was with Mu Exen, Hao San had been following him. He had so many subordinates, but only Hao San knew about his and Mu Exen's past. Hao San was the one who understood the feud between him and Mu Exen. Hao San was also the only one who could drink with him to relieve his boredom. Bai Yanqing suddenly let go. Hao San fell to the ground, motionless. He was really dead. Why did she not want me? Tell me. Tell me. As Bai Yanqing asked, he looked at his palm. Suddenly, regret and sadness surfaced in his heart. However, he quickly ignored it. No, he deserved to die. If he hadn't stopped her, Han Yunxi definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. He deserved to die. Bai Yanqing didn't delay any longer. He turned and chased after Han Yunxi to the right. At this moment, Long Fei Yi and Gu were already in the maze. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li were still hesitating in front of the 20 stone doors. They didn't know which one to take. They walked in from the cave on the cliff. After breaking the array, they saw a row of 20 stone doors. Inside each stone door was a bottomless passageway. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Back in Monarch Descent Mountain, they'd encountered a similar layout. Different doors had different dangers and all of them led to dead ends. There was only one path that led to the end. Back then Gu Beiyue had been hiding in the shadows. He'd clearly seen how arrogant the Duanmu siblings were and how Han Yunxi had tricked them. It was also that time that Duanmu Yao bore a grudge against Han Yunxi. But that time they'd only faced a few doors. Now there were 20. Tang clan head, please wait here. I'll try them one by one. Gu Beiyue made his final decision. Tang Li immediately stopped him. No. It's too dangerous. Although Gu Beiyue was fast enough to escape, what if there were poisonous miasma or other poisonous creatures inside? This was the poison sect. Although this was a big risk to begin with, they couldn't take such a huge risk right at the entrance. They had to wait for Bai Yanqing to show up first. They didn't know that Bai Yanqing's subordinates were watching them from the shadows, so they didn't send the shadow guard over. They were also afraid that too many people would cause too much of a commotion and expose themselves. It's fine, Gu Beiyue said seriously. No. If you're poisoned, what will I do? Who'll take me in? Tang Li countered. Tang clan head, we can't delay any longer. His Highness and the others should have already gone in, Gu Beiyue said seriously. If possible, he didn't want to take such a risk here. Moreover, there were 19 dangers ahead. How long will it take you to go through all of them? Tang Li asked seriously. I don't know the depth, so it's hard to say, Gu Beiyue replied honestly. Go back to the medical academy and bring back a cage of rats. How does that sound? Tang Li took out a hidden weapon as he spoke. As soon as he saw Gu's hidden weapon, Gu Beiyue's calm eyes lit up. That's a good idea. With his speed, going back and forth to the medical academy was a very fast thing. This mountain was right behind the medical academy. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue retreated to the bottom of the cliff. Tang Li and the shadow guard stood guard below while Gu Beiyue rushed to the medical academy. Soon enough, they brought 2 large cages of rats back to the 20th door. The medical academy was using rats for research and had raised a large group of them. They had as many as they wanted. Gu Beiyue had brought a large cage of over 20 of them crammed into each other. Seeing that the mouths of the rats had been sealed, Tang Li couldn't help but admire Gu Beiyue's meticulousness and speed. Tang Li took out a hidden needle. This needle was different from other hidden weapons. There was a thin thread on the needle. He didn't know what material it was made of, but it was colorless and transparent. Although it was thin, it was hard. If he didn't look at it closely, he wouldn't be able to see it. Gu Beiyue deliberately pulled on the thin thread, but he couldn't break it. This is called a needle and thread. It's used to delay people. The needle is very ordinary, but the thread is unique to the Tang sect. It's called a hidden thread. A few elders of the Tang sect came up with it. It was just developed last month. They gave each of the shadow guard 3 needles. If we don't catch Bai Yanqing and he escapes, as long as someone can shoot him, they can at least follow him for a while and delay him. Tang Li explained in a low voice as he pierced the back of the rats with the hidden needles. Although it was a stab wound, it wasn't fatal. Instead, it frightened the rats and made them struggle. Tang Li placed the rats in front of the first door. The rats ran forward as if they were running for their lives. As the rats ran, Tang Li released the thin thread around his wrist. Soon the thread stopped moving. Tang Li hurriedly dragged the rats back. When the rats came out of the cave, Gu Beiyue and Tang Li both gasped. Oh my god. Gu Beiyue, I saved your life. The rats were already dead. They didn't know what poison they were poisoned with, but their heads and faces were unrecognizable. In such a short time, they didn't hear any movement in the cave. God knows what kind of poison was in there. God knows how the rats were poisoned. Do you still have a needle and thread? Gu Beiyue asked. Tang Li hurriedly gave him one. The 2 of them divided the work and used this method to test every entrance. Soon they had 19 dead rats. Some of the rats were bitten by unknown things. When they were dragged out, only half of their bodies were left. These caves were dangerous to begin with. Just the poisonous miasma that Bai Yanqing set up was enough to make them suffer. It had to be said that Tang Li was right to be cautious this time. The 19 caves were all dead ends and were all sealed. Therefore, Bai Yanqing had already set up a poisonous miasma. No matter how fast Gu Beiyue was, he would definitely be poisoned as soon as he entered. Only the last door was left. Tang Li sighed in relief. It should be this way. Gu Beiyue still took a rat to experiment. The rat ran into the cave for a long time before the hidden threads chasing after it stopped. In the end, all the hidden threads were used up. Gu Beiyue had no choice but to drag the rat back. When he pulled it back, the rat was still alive and well. This is the way. Can't be wrong. Tang Li was overjoyed. Gu Beiyue didn't dare to delay any longer. He used his qinggong and flew in with Tang Li. However, they didn't go far before they encountered a formation. Fortunately, Gu Beiyue spent the past 3 months in the Tian and imperial capital and learned the art of Qimen Duanjia. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come today. After the first array formation was broken, another array formation appeared. In just one passage, Bai Yanqing set up a total of 5 formations. Han Yunqi didn't choose this path. Sure enough, it was the right choice. Such a tight formation made Gu Qishao guess that it was very likely to lead to a prisoner's prison. When they broke the 5th formation and walked out of the passage, they saw from afar. Chapter 11:23. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li saw Hao San's corpse from afar. The two of them strode over and saw even more clearly that Hao San had been struck in the head with a palm, and was forcibly shaken to death. Neither of them knew Hao San, but they were sure that he was Bai Yanqing's subordinate. It doesn't look like my brother and Gu's handiwork. They can't be that fast, Tang Li muttered to himself as he squatted down to check. Gu noticed that the blood flowing out of Hao San was very strange. He quickly grabbed Tang Li's hand and said, "Be careful, he might have been poisoned." "Could it be my sister-in-law?" Tang Li was shocked. "It's possible," Gu Beiyue said seriously. They really did not think that Bai Yanqing would kill his subordinate. "So, did my sister-in-law escape?" Tang Li asked again. Gu Beiyue had already found the stone room with the door open. He said, "To be exact, she should be escaping." He walked into the stone room and Tang Li quickly followed. They found a medicine pot in the stone room and some medicinal herbs that had not been decocted yet. Gu Beiyue took a look at the medicinal herbs and immediately confirmed, "The princess is trapped here. She must have left not long ago." The dregs in the medicine hut had not been cleaned up, so he estimated the time it took for the decoction to be decocted. Based on the time of Hao San's death, it must have been just now. They mistakenly thought that Hao San was killed by Han Yunqi. It could be considered a coincidence. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li looked at each other. They did not say anything and rushed out of the door at the same time. There were only 2 paths here. One was to the left, which led to the passage to the cliff. The other was to the right. It was dark and they could not see where it led to. Needless to say, Han Yunqi must have escaped to the right. Otherwise, she would have been trapped in the formation. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li chased to the right. They did not go far before they saw several corpses. They were all poisoned to death and they died not long ago. As a result, they were even more convinced that Han Yunqi had just escaped from the stone room. What a coincidence! If she had escaped a little later, she would have bumped into them. Soon, Tang Li and Gu Beiyue's figures disappeared into the darkness of the passage. At first, they were still walking straight ahead. Later on, they encountered a fork in the road. The original road split into 2. They did not know which path to choose, so they could only choose one path. But who would have thought that after walking for a while they would come across 2 crossroads? They had no choice but to continue to choose one path. After a while, Gu Beiyue realized something was off. "Tang Li, let's turn back. There's something wrong with this path." Formation. Tang Li also found it strange. Why were they still in the passage after walking for so long? The stone walls on both sides were very similar. They could not tell if they had walked this path before. It might be a maze. "I hope it's not," Gu Beiyue said seriously. Gu Beiyue left a mark. He and Tang Li turned back to the original path and changed to another intersection. Who knew that after walking for half a day, they would actually see the mark they left behind? "It's a maze," Tang Li said angrily. "Don't stop. Keep walking. If the princess was not caught by Bai Yanqing, she should also be in the maze. Maybe we can meet her," Gu Beiyue said seriously. His words immediately cheered Tang Li up. His sister-in-law might be with Ning Jing. Perhaps his sister-in-law knew where Ning Jing was locked up. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue walked in circles in the maze. At the same time, Long Fei Yi and Gu were also walking in circles. Gu had always been impatient. He handed over Immerse's sword. "Let's just break these stone walls." Long Fei Yi glared at him coldly. "You'll have to bear the consequences if you act rashly and alert the enemy." Gu hurriedly put away Immerse's sword. "Then what should we do?" Perhaps Bai Yanqing's watching us from the shadows and laughing at us? Long Fei Yi looked at him and said, "If you're impatient, then get out." Gu was furious. If he was impatient, would he have waited until now? Long Fei Yi ignored him and did not continue walking. Instead, he sat down cross-legged on the spot. They had already walked a few rounds. They had been walking around the same spot. After going around in circles, they returned to the same spot. Instead of walking in circles and wasting their energy, it was better to sit down and think of a strategy before taking action. Seeing Long Fei Yi sit down, Gu looked like he wanted to say something. However, he hesitated for a moment and turned his head to the other side, ignoring him. Quarreling at the slightest disagreement and Cold War at the slightest disagreement. This was probably referring to the two of them. Gu sat down not far away from Long Fei Yi and began to think about how to get out of this maze. He thought that there was a trick, but Long Fei Yi had already confirmed that with their abilities, there was no trick to getting out of this maze. They could only eliminate the obstacles one by one. Long Fei Yi suddenly turned to look at Gu. "Hey." Gu immediately looked over and narrowed his eyes at him without saying a word. "Stay guard. I need to think." Long Fei Yi's tone was no different from an order. "What are you thinking about?" Gu asked again. Just how much did Long Fei dislike talking to Gu Qishao? If he could avoid talking, he would try his best not to. If he had to, he would also not talk about it. He didn't answer Gu. Instead, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Gu only felt that his bottom line had been challenged. However, in order to save Poison Lass, he had no choice but to endure it. He secretly swore that in the future he would speak less with Long Fei Yi. If Long Fei Yi asked him anything, he would exchange his own life for his own. Long Fei Yi closed his eyes and seriously recalled the paths and intersections that they had just walked through. Since they had entered the maze, they had gone around in circles and returned to their original spot 6 times. In these 6 times, they had not gone one round and they had met 7 to 8 three-way intersections. Once they chose a junction, they would face 7 to 8 more intersections. If they didn't choose one of the intersections, they would face 5 to 6 more intersections. Sometimes the intersections would lead back to the original junction. Sometimes they would walk a few rounds before coming back. In short, it was very complicated. Long Fei Yi carefully recalled the paths they had taken. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly bit his finger and used his blood to draw a map on the ground. Seeing this, Gu was astonished and immediately came over to take a look. He saw that Long Fei Yi had drawn a few hexagons on the ground that were close to each other. It looked like a beehive. Gu couldn't understand it no matter how he looked at it. Long Fei Yi's eyes were cold as he stared at it seriously. He didn't know what he was thinking about. Gu waited for a while, but Long Fei Yi didn't make a sound. Hence, he threw his lofty aspirations to the back of his mind and asked anxiously, "What happened to you? What are you drawing?" Long Fei Yi ignored him and continued to focus on the bloodstains on the ground. If he guessed correctly, the maze in the underground palace should be a beehive maze. It was made up of countless hexagons. The 6 corners of each hexagon were three-way intersections. The maze was very big, so sometimes they went astray and took a long detour before coming back. Other times they didn't go astray and walked a small detour before coming back. When they took a big detour and came back from a different direction, they couldn't see the sign from before. When they took a small detour, they could see the sign after going back from where they came from. If it was confirmed that it was a beehive maze, Long Fei Yi naturally had a way to solve it. However, he couldn't be completely sure. Hence, he still had to walk a few more rounds and do a few more experiments. Long Fei Yi got up. He didn't bother to greet Gu and walked forward. Gu had no choice but to follow him with a gloomy face. While Gu Beiyue and Tang Li were walking in circles and Long Fei Yi and Gu were doing experiments, Bai Yanqing was looking for Han Yunqi everywhere. Yes. Although Bai Yanqing knew how to get out of the maze, he couldn't completely control the entire maze. After all, the maze was too big and there were several levels. He didn't have enough manpower. Han Yunqi and 4th young mistress Ren disappeared after entering the maze. Bai Yanqing and several guards couldn't find them. The more Bai Yanqing searched, the more irritable he became. The entrance formations on both sides had been broken. If Han Yunqi met Long Fei Yi and the others and they escaped, how much effort would he have to put in to catch them again? After Bai Yanqing searched around the maze, he finally stopped and said coldly, "Go and bring Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu out for Old Man." These 2 hostages could still be put to good use. Bai Yanqing quickly disappeared into the maze. After an hour, Long Fei Yi was completely sure that this maze was a beehive maze. He took the initiative to tell Gu, "This maze has many levels. It's a man-made beehive with many exits. However, this kind of maze usually has many traps. It's safer to hide the hostages inside the maze than behind it. We should be at the top level now. There's no other way but to go down level by level. Remember, don't act rashly and alert the enemy." Looking for them floor by floor, based on Long Fei Ye's estimation of this maze, coupled with his and Gu's speed, they should be able to walk through every path in about 2 days and 2 nights. Who knew, just as Long Fei Yi and Gu were about to move forward, a familiar voice suddenly came from the right. This voice was a sharp woman's cry, as if she had been greatly frightened. "Ningjing." Long Fei Yi recognized this voice. He had heard it once in General Mu's residence. Right. Gu immediately identified the source of the voice. The two were about to go over, who knew that another scream would come. It was actually Su Xiaoyu's voice. "Left." Long Fei Yi said. "What happened? Why were Ningjing and Su Xiaoyu on the left and right sides of the maze? Why did they scream at the same time? Where was Han Yunxi?" Gu and Long Fei Yi had a rare tacit understanding. The two of them stood still and waiting for Han Yunxi's voice. However, they waited for a long time and did not hear Han Yunxi's voice. Instead, they heard Ningjing and Su Xiaoyu shouting a few times on the left and right sides. Their voices were so loud that it resounded through the entire maze. God knew what they had experienced. At this moment, Gu Beiyue and Tang Li, who were far away at the other end of the maze, also heard the voices. Tang Li did not hesitate to chase in the direction of Ningjing's voice. Gu Beiyue had no choice but to chase after him and lead him forward quickly. Long Fei Yi and Gu were really calm. They waited for a while. When they did not hear Han Yunxi's voice, Long Fei Yi said, "Let's find Su Xiaoyu first." Su Xiaoyu and Ningjing were in trouble. Something might have happened to Han Yunxi as well. The voices were so loud that Tang Li must have gone to find Ningjing. Therefore they could only choose Su Xiaoyu. They ran very fast, afraid that the voices would stop. Unexpectedly, not only did the screams not stop, but they also continued. Finally, Long Fei Yi stopped. "It's a trap." Chapter 11:24. It's a trap. There were sounds of hostages in both directions and it was continuous. It didn't seem like Bai Yanqing was torturing the hostages. Instead, it seemed like he was deliberately making the hostages make sounds. Otherwise, why would he imprison them in different directions in the maze? And torture them at the same time? If there were only 1 or 2 shouts, perhaps Long Fei Yi wouldn't have thought so much. The shouts continued and they were probably interrogating someone. As soon as Long Fei said it was a trap, Gu Qishao stopped as well. He felt that something was off as well. "Long Fei, this isn't a plan to lure the snake out of its hole, right? Who is he trying to lure out?" Long Fei Yi asked. Gu leaned back against the wall and crossed his arms. He slowly narrowed his eyes and looked at Long Fei Yi. Judging from his posture, he seemed to have guessed something. But unexpectedly he said to Long Fei Yi, "What do you think?" Long Fei Yi had the urge to throw this guy to Tang Li and get Gu Beiyue instead. He didn't answer Gu. Instead he said, "Go to Ningjing quick." If Bai Yanqing wanted to lure the snake out of its hole, there were only 2 possibilities. The first was that Bai Yanqing already knew that they had barged in, but because of the size of the maze he couldn't find them. The second possibility was what he hoped for the most, and that was that Han Yunxi had escaped from Bai Yanqing's restraints. Bai Yanqing could only use the hostages in his hands to threaten Han Yunxi again. No matter which possibility it was, they would be luring the snake out of its hole if they endured it to the end, so their best option was to ignore it. As long as Bai Yanqing didn't achieve his goal, he would definitely not let the hostages die. However, they had to hurry over to Ningjing now because Tang Li would definitely not be able to hold himself back. Gu Beiyue wouldn't be able to persuade Tang Li either. At this moment, Tang Li and Gu Beiyue were probably chasing after Ningjing's shouts. Instead of letting the 2 of them face Bai Yanqing alone, it would be better for him and Gu to go together. If they couldn't find Han Yunxi, it would be better to subdue Bai Yanqing first. Thinking of this, Long Fei Yi deliberately looked back at Gu and said, "Cold Gu. Gu, it's time for you to make your move." Any time. Gu wasn't stupid. Although he didn't think as deeply or as thoroughly as Long Fei Yi, he more or less knew that this was a trap. However, their best option was to meet up with Gu Beiyue and Tang Li. It was just that he was too lazy to think about it. The biggest advantage of following Long Fei Yi was that he didn't have to think about so many complicated things. Scheming against each other, trying to figure out people's minds, and scheming were all too complicated and tiring. In any case, Long Fei Yi would definitely think of everything that he could think of, but he might not be able to think of anything that Long Fei Yi could think of. He only had one goal in entering the underground palace, and that was to fight. If he saw Bai Yanqing, he would fight with all his might. Although he wasn't a poison goo human that was raised, and although he still didn't know why he was immortal, he knew that he was much younger than Bai Yanqing. In fact, Bai Yanqing was an elder and he was a junior. He wanted to see who could take a beating better, him, the young immortal, or that old immortal Bai Yanqing. Although Ning Jing's voice wasn't continuous, it still didn't stop. Although they were in the maze with everyone's hearing, they could still accurately distinguish the source of the sound. Long Fei Yi and Gu moved forward as quickly as possible, while Gu Beiyue and Tang Li also moved forward quickly. Although there were situations where they took the wrong path, they still circled back and continued moving forward in the end. One of them was in the west and the other was in the east. They were getting closer and closer to Ning Jing's position, and the closer they were, the less likely they would take the wrong path. Han Yunxi and fourth young Mistress Ren, who were hiding somewhere in the maze, had already heard Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu's screams. Fourth young Mistress Ren was so frightened that she didn't know what to do. Han Yunxi leaned against the wall, listening carefully while thinking. It had to be said that she, who was usually decisive, was hesitating this time. She hesitated for a long time and didn't know what to do until now. She knew that Long Fei Yi and the rest had solved the riddle and should be coming over. Otherwise, Bai Yanqing wouldn't have questioned her about the prescription. However, she didn't know that Long Fei Yi and the rest had already arrived at the underground palace and were in the maze. Bai Yanqing's motive for doing this was to lure her out. As long as she didn't go out, Bai Yanqing wouldn't dare to do anything to Ning Jing, Little Yu and the rest. She could even take the opportunity to escape from the maze. Bai Yanqing wouldn't let the hostages die. She knew that the best choice was to take the opportunity to escape. Perhaps she could meet up with Long Fei Yi and the rest after escaping. This way it would be the best way to save Ning Jing and Little Yu. However, Ning Jing and Little Yu would suffer. What should she do? Fourth young Mistress Ren was pulled along by Han Yunxi as they ran for their lives. She still hadn't recovered from her shock and was still trembling with fear. She sat on the ground and hugged her knees. Han Yunxi exhaled and asked casually, "Fourth young Mistress Ren, Bai Yanqing wants to lure us out. What do you think we should do?" Fourth young Mistress Ren raised her head. Han Yunxi was helpless and didn't pursue the matter. Medical practitioners, especially doctors who were involved in clinical operations, had a stronger psychological quality than the average person. However, no matter how strong a person's psychological quality was, there was a bottom line. Fourth young Mistress Ren, who had never experienced fighting and killing, had not broken down until now. Han Yunxi should have comforted her, but she really wasn't in the mood. She was anxious. Only God knew what Ning Jing and Little Yu were going through at this moment. At this moment, fourth young Mistress Ren said timidly, "Princess, I won't do anything. It's just that. I don't understand why the voices are coming from two different directions." These words immediately reminded Han Yunxi. Almost as soon as fourth young Mistress Ren finished speaking, Han Yunxi blurted out, "Our reinforcements have arrived at the maze. It must be." If Bai Yanqing wanted to lure her out, he could have used one hostage. Why did he have to use two hostages at the same time and from two different directions? No matter how capable Bai Yanqing was, he couldn't possibly have the ability to split himself into two. He could only be with one of the hostages. If he was with Su Xiaoyu, wouldn't he be afraid that she would look for Ning Jing? Although Bai Yanqing's subordinates were all highly skilled in martial arts and poison, they wouldn't be able to defeat her even if they joined forces. Bai Yanqing was asking for trouble. The only possibility was that Bai Yanqing not only wanted to lure her out, but he also wanted to lure the others out and split them up. These others must be Long Fei Yi and the rest. Fourth young Mistress Ren was just curious and didn't know much. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment and said seriously, "Fourth young Mistress Ren, stay here and don't move. I'll go over and take a look." Fourth young Mistress Ren held Han Yunxi's hand nervously. She seemed to want to say something but didn't dare to. In the end, she let go of Han Yunxi's hand. Han Yunxi knew that fourth young Mistress Ren was worried that she wouldn't be able to come back once she left. Han Yunxi squatted down and looked at fourth young Mistress Ren seriously. If I leave now, I might not be able to come back for a long time or even forever. I know. Fourth young Mistress Ren lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Han Yunxi. If you follow me. Before Han Yunxi could finish her sentence, fourth young Mistress Ren interrupted her. We'll be in more danger and I'll be a burden to you. I choose to stay. Fourth young Mistress Ren took out a poison pill and said seriously, this is a slow-acting poison. It won't have any effect on the body before it acts up. It will only act up after a year. Take it first and I'll be able to find you when the time comes. I'll be able to find the poisoned person quickly. There were so many labyrinths. Although she was sure that this was a huge honeycomb labyrinth, she didn't know where they were in the honeycomb labyrinth. Once they were far away, it wouldn't be easy to come back to find them. She could only rely on the detoxification system. It would take a year for the poison to act up, which was enough insurance. Because if she couldn't come back after a year, she wouldn't come back. Han Yunxi thought that fourth young Mistress Ren would hesitate, but she actually took the poison pill and swallowed it. Han Yunxi saw this and felt grateful. She was so afraid that fourth young Mistress Ren wouldn't be able to bear the risk and would cry and beg her to save her. The person Gu Beiyue chose was really reliable. No matter what, she had to try her best to protect fourth young Mistress Ren. A woman like her would definitely have a bright future in the medical school. After settling fourth young Mistress Ren down, Han Yunxi hurriedly set off. She was afraid that Ning Jing's voice would stop. If that happened, it would be difficult for her to find her. Unfortunately, after Han Yunxi ran for a long distance, Ning Jing's voice stopped abruptly as she got closer to her. Not long after, Su Xiaoyu's voice stopped as well. Han Yunxi was so angry that she wanted to kick the wall with her foot, but she forced herself to hold back. She couldn't expose her whereabouts even if she couldn't find her. The voice stopped. Could it be that Long Fei Yi and the rest had found her? Han Yunxi didn't hesitate and continued to walk forward cautiously. She didn't dare to walk too fast or go too far, for fear that she would choose the wrong fork and go in the wrong direction. She really hoped that Long Fei Yi and the rest were around so that she wouldn't go in the wrong direction if there was any movement or sound. At this moment, Long Fei Yi and the rest had gathered together and were standing at the door of a stone room. Ning Jing's voice clearly came from inside, but when they arrived there was no one in the stone room. Long Fei Yi personally grabbed Tang Li's arm. Otherwise, Tang Li would have already rushed in. It was obvious that there was a trap in the stone room. Bai Yanqing was hiding in a dark corner of the stone room, cold as he stared at the group at the door. He'd wanted to lure Han Yunxi out and scatter the group in different directions, but who knew that these four fellows would come looking for him together? There wasn't even a trace of Han Yunxi's shadow. Since everyone was here, he didn't mind having a few more hostages in his hands. He didn't mind imprisoning Long Fei Yi as well. Now that the situation in Cloud Realm had settled down, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, their two masters, were missing. The Eastern-Western Qin factions would definitely have a good show to watch. The world would never be peaceful again. Long Fei Yi and the rest lingered at the door of the stone room. Bai Yanqing's lips curled into a cold smile as he pushed open the mechanism and walked down from the stone wall. He chuckled and said, "Young people, long time no see." Chapter 11:25. Long Fei Yi and the others could clearly see that Bai Yanqing had come down from the mezzanine of the stone room. Then were the hostages also trapped in the mezzanine? Where's Ning Jing? Bai Yanqing, return Ning Jing to me, otherwise I'll fight you. Tang Li was already half out of control. When he did not hear Ning Jing's voice, he was still calm, but when he heard Ning Jing's shouts, he could not control himself. Anger, excitement, nervousness, worry, fear, and etc. All kinds of bad emotions filled his heart. If he did not see Ning Jing, he did not know when he would go crazy. It was a good thing Long Fei Yi was holding on to him, otherwise he would have been taken down by Bai Yanqing. Return Ning Jing to me, do you hear me? For a grown man, other than kidnapping women, what else do you know? Tell me. If you have fucking guts, let them all go. Father will fight you one-on-one. Do you dare? Bai Yanqing, you coward. Bai Yanqing allowed Tang Li to curse and berate him as he wished, but didn't spare him a glance. All of his attention was on Long Fei. Their sweetheart had been kidnapped, but Long Fei Ye's reaction was completely different from Tang Li's. Cold as he looked at Bai Yanqing, not moving at all. It was hard to see through him. This kind of calmness, Bai Yanqing admired him very much. It seems like the East Qin crown prince does not care about the life or death of his sweetheart. Bai Yanqing said with a cold smile. She will not die. Long Fei Ye's voice was as cold as ice, filled with certainty. Bai Yanqing disliked Long Fei Ye's attitude the most, this kind of aloof attitude that seemed like everything was under his control. He coldly said, "It's too early to say, don't regret it later." What a joke. Long Fei Ye's tone became even more sarcastic. Bai Yanqing, you just want the two of us to fail in our dual cultivation and kill each other. You just want the eastern and western Qin sides to continue fighting. You won't kill her. You have to take good care of her. Otherwise, why would you find her medicine to prevent miscarriage? Long Fei Yi was actually anxious in his heart, but he had already calmed down after such a long time. A little while more wouldn't make a difference. The hostage must be in the stone room. At the very least, Ning Jing must be there. There must be a trap in this stone room. Therefore they must not enter unless absolutely necessary. Even if there were no traps, it would be easy for Bai Yanqing to poison them in a confined space like the stone chamber. However, it would be difficult for them to avoid the poison in time. The wisest choice was to waste time with Bai Yanqing and look for flaws and countermeasures. He didn't believe that Bai Yanqing would be able to escape now that he was right in front of him. Bai Yanqing didn't care that his scheme had been exposed. At this point he no longer had the patience to play with this group of young people. Today he was determined to imprison Long Fei Yi. Bai Yanqing finally looked at the furious Tang Li. However, he pointed at Long Fei Yi and said, "We can have a one-on-one duel, but he'll come. Those who don't dare are cowards." Long Fei Yi was about to answer when Gu suddenly laughed wildly. "Old man, you don't even dare to accept Tang Li's challenge. What right do you have to fight Long Fei Yi?" Bai Yanqing wasn't so easily provoked. He ignored Gu and looked cold at Long Fei Yi, waiting for Long Fei Yi to accept the challenge. Other than Long Fei Yi, who else had Gu's cheap mouth lost to? Bai Yanqing's indifference didn't discourage him. Instead, it aroused his fighting spirit. He said, "Oh right. I forgot that you're a coward. Poison Girl said she was going to castrate you, but you didn't even show up." At this point, Bai Yanqing had already glanced at Gu from the corner of his eyes. Aside from Long Fei and Han Yunxi, he'd never really considered anyone else worthy of his attention. As for Gu Qishao, he only knew that the man was a test subject who'd survived a calamity thanks to medicine. Ouch. Gu suddenly slapped his thigh hard. The sudden and intense reaction made Long Fei Yi and the others look at him, wondering what was wrong with him. Bai Yanqing finally looked over as well. Gu Qishao said, "Long Fei, this old man suddenly remembered something. Tiskei, why didn't I think of it back then?" "What is it?" Long Fei Yi asked. Although he didn't know what Gu was up to, he was very sure that Gu was putting on an act. He was very willing to play along. Gu narrowed his eyes and looked like he was deep in thought. He said seriously, "Long Fei Yi, do you think this old thing is a eunuch? Otherwise, why wouldn't he dare to show up when Poison Girl threatened to castrate him?" As soon as he said this, even Tang Li, who was still struggling, suddenly quieted down. The spacious corridor was completely silent. Which man could stand this kind of provocation? Bai Yanqing wouldn't be a man if he kept quiet. He said angrily, "Shut up." Gu was a very strong-willed person. Since Bai Yanqing had ignored him earlier, he couldn't be bothered with Bai Yanqing now. He didn't even look at him. He chuckled at Long Fei Yi and said, No wonder. Poison Girl has always suspected that this old thing isn't her father. She said that they weren't related by blood. Maybe he really isn't Poison Girl's father. He could not do such a thing. No wonder. No wonder Madame Mu Exin followed someone else." Gu, shut up. Bai Yanqing was thoroughly enraged. Mu Exin had always been his greatest weakness. Any topic related to Mu Exin could touch his sensitive nerves. Gu smiled carelessly, his face full of disdain. When he was investigating Han Yunxi's identity, he had thoroughly investigated the rumors about Mu Exin and the poison sex orphan. He had heard several versions of the rumors. Judging from Bai Yanqing's sinister actions and the fact that Mu Exin had left the poison sect to marry Hong Kongan, there must be some grudge between Mu Exin and Bai Yanqing. Perhaps Bai Yanqing was tormenting Poison Girl like this to get back at Mu Exin. Thinking up to here, Gu turned back to Bai Yanqing. He rubbed his chin and asked seriously, "Old thing, there's no one else here besides us men. Tell me the truth, is it because you can't do it that Mu Xian abandoned you and even settled for trash like Hong Kongan? Gu. This old man will kill you. Bai Yanqing exploded. Kill this old man? You're neither male nor female, an immortal and indestructible thing. You think you're worthy? Gu scoffed. Bai Yanqing immediately raised his sword and charged out. Gu shot a look at Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue before fleeing down the stone corridor. This was the first time in his life that Bai Yanqing had been humiliated like this. He was so angry that he swung his sword and chased after Gu. Gu hadn't actually run far. He had started fighting with Bai Yanqing in the corridor behind the right fork. Long Fei Yi had captured Tang Li and hadn't moved from his spot. He was basically betting on the left side of the corridor to prevent Bai Yanqing from escaping. Gu Beiyue had already entered the secret room and quickly searched for hidden passages on the walls and floor. Ning Jing's voice had come from this room, so the hostages must still be here. Brother, let me go. Let me in. Tang Li said anxiously. Try making noise again. Long Fei Yi said sternly. His line of sight had always been in front of him. Although he couldn't see the situation on Gu's side, his attention was focused there. The reason why he let Gu Beiyue enter the stone room alone was because Gu Beiyue was fast. If there were any traps, he would be able to escape quickly. Long Fei Yi let go of Tang Li, and Tang Li really didn't dare to make any more noise. He had to be scolded before he could calm down. He looked into the stone room and prepared his hidden weapons, guarding against situations that could happen at any time. In front of him, the sounds of fighting were getting louder and louder. Gu and Bai Yanqing were locked in a fierce battle. Gu's swordsmanship wasn't as good as Bai Yanqing's. However, with the sword spirit of Mo Xie's treasured sword in his hand, in terms of martial arts, he and Bai Yanqing were on par. He had also shown his trump card at the beginning and only fought with Bai Yanqing. Now that they had fought for more than 10 moves, there was still no clear winner. Bai Yanqing wasn't so patient. He had to vent his anger on Gu. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to take it lying down. Suddenly, he put away his sword and faced Gu's sword head-on, closing in on Gu. A complicated look flashed past Gu's eyes. He suddenly retreated all the way to Long Fei Yi's side. At this time, Gu Beiyue just came out of the stone room. Other than the mezzanine where Bai Yanqing had hidden, he didn't find any other mechanism. Gu Beiyue wanted to talk to Long Fei Yi. Seeing that Gu had fled back and Bai Yanqing had chased after them, they became alert and didn't dare to be distracted. Long Fei Yi frowned slightly. Why did Gu run back? Didn't he know to buy more time? Although Gu Beiyue didn't find any other mechanisms in the stone room, it didn't mean that there were no mezzanines or traps in the stone room. Many of the Tang sect's hidden weapons were small mechanisms. He often stayed in the Tang sect. Although he didn't learn, he knew a little about mechanism design. In order to prevent others from discovering many traps and secret rooms, the activation mechanism would be hidden outside and guarded by specialized people. Tang Li's attention was all on Ning Jing. Otherwise, he would have thought of it long ago. If he led Gu Beiyue around the stone room to find the mechanism, they should be able to find it very quickly. Gu lured Bai Yanqing over like this. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li couldn't move. They could only wait and see. Brat, don't run if you have the guts. Bai Yanqing said angrily. Which eye of yours saw me run away? Gu retorted. He turned around and said to Long Fei Yi and the others, there's a poisonous aura behind you. It should be a group of poisonous snakes. Be careful of the poisonous gas. It turned out that Gu had specially come over to warn them. The group of snakes was behind them. Even with their hearing, they didn't detect any movement. It seemed that not only could this group of poisonous snakes spit out poisonous gas, but they were also silent when they crawled. Bai Yanqing used poison as expected. Gu Beiyue immediately took out his small golden knife. Tang Li was also on guard, holding his hidden weapon. When facing a group of poisonous snakes, they could only attack from afar. It would be troublesome if they were entangled by the snakes. The group of snakes hadn't come close yet. Long Fei Yi was relieved to leave his back to Gu Beiyue and Tang Li. He looked at Bai Yanqing coldly. Gu, you're right today. Bai Yanqing is a coward. After Gu's previous no comment, Long Fei Yi's coward was even more insulting. Long Fei Yi was obviously doing it on purpose. Bai Yanqing was completely enraged. Long Fei Yi, just you wait. After I take care of Gu, you'll be next. Chapter 11:26. Deal with him. Long Fei Yi sneered disdainfully. Bai Yanqing, you can't even deal with the four of us with your immortal body and you still have to use poison. If you're not a coward, then what are you? Gu's eyes lit up as if he had heard something. He quickly said, Long Fei Yi, let's not argue with a coward. Even if he uses poison, we're not afraid of him. Bai Yanqing could tell that he was trying to goad him, but he couldn't take it lying down. He immediately blew a whistle and the snakes that were approaching immediately retreated. This group of people didn't know that Han Yunxi, who couldn't find anyone, had already activated the detoxification system to detect the presence of the venomous snakes, and was about to come over. In the end, the venomous snakes scattered, and her direction was completely messed up. She could only slowly search around. Bai Yanqing said angrily, All right, old man doesn't need to use poison. Do you want to come one by one or all of you together? Long Fei Yi was waiting for him to say that. If Bai Yanqing didn't use poison, they would be much safer. Even if Han Yunxi wasn't around, they could still tie Bai Yanqing up. One by one, lest you lose and say that we bully you with numbers. Gu was in a good mood and he replied with a smile. In your dreams. Bai Yanqing didn't understand where this group of youngsters got the confidence to say such things. Were they trying to trap him? That was simply wishful thinking. He suddenly flew towards Gu. Gu didn't dodge and he swung his sword fiercely at him. Even if he couldn't kill Bai Yanqing, he definitely wouldn't miss any chance to hurt him. He wouldn't die, right? It was good that he wouldn't die. He could keep him and slowly torture him. Gu's sword slashed Bai Yanqing's arm, leaving a deep cut. Bai Yanqing was indifferent and he clawed at Gu's neck. Gu Qishao was naturally on guard and quickly dodged out of the way. He threw a punch at Bai Yanqing's face. Bai Yanqing dodged to the side and drew his sword to stab Gu's abdomen. Gu narrowly avoided it. He retreated again and patted his chest. You scared me to death. Bai Yanqing did not give him any chance to catch his breath and continued to chase after him. Gu once again raised his sword and ruthlessly stabbed forward. Bai Yanqing still didn't dodge and allowed the sword to pierce through his abdomen. He still attacked Gu head-on, and the tip of his sword was close to Gu's heart. Gu still wanted to escape, but Bai Yanqing suddenly rushed forward. In an instant, Gu's entire sword pierced through Bai Yanqing's abdomen. Bai Yanqing also forced himself in front of Gu. He drew a dagger from his sleeve and pressed it against Gu's heart. He didn't stab it, but Gu didn't dare to move. You've lost. Bai Yanqing's eyes were cold and he stared at Gu. Gu didn't answer him and his eyes turned cold. In an instant, the surrounding thorny vines rose up crazily and surrounded the two of them. Bai Yanqing laughed. Brat, you're trying to trap me with thorny vines? Can't I? Gu sneered. Let me go or else I'll make sure you can't escape for the rest of your life. Bai Yanqing snorted and drew his sword with his other hand. With a fierce swing, he cut off a large patch of thorny vines. Old man can leave your corpse intact as long as you admit that you're a coward. If Bai Yanqing didn't want to fight for his dignity, why would he bother with Gu? He would have made a move on Long Fei Yi long ago. Gu looked at the broken thorny vines, and then lowered his head to look at the blade pressed against his heart. He pretended to be terrified. Old Bai, actually, the one who wants to kill you is Long Fei Yi, not me. Cut the crap. Are you going to talk or not? Bai Yanqing didn't have much patience. I'll talk. If I say that Long Fei Yi is a coward, can you let me go? Gu asked anxiously. Before Bai Yanqing could react, Long Fei Yi's eyes immediately shot out murderous intent. He drew his sword and released an unusually sharp sword aura, which directly slashed at Gu's head. Gu, you're asking for death. The sword aura was so sharp that it was unstoppable. It really chopped down on Gu's head and even Bai Yanqing was affected. If he hadn't grabbed Gu's sleeve, he would have been sent flying. As for the thorny vines surrounding them, they were all destroyed and fell to the ground. Bai Yanqing was dumbfounded. What was going on? Long Fei actually made a move against Gu Qishao? After all, Gu was the only one among them who knew poison. Long Fei was crazy? Tang Li, who didn't know the truth, was also stunned. Brother, you... Blood slowly flowed down along Gu's hairline, flowed to his long eyelashes and dripped down. The whole place was silent. Bai Yanqing looked at Gu in disbelief. For a moment he was a little confused and didn't know what was going on. However, Long Fei Yi's anger hadn't subsided. If he didn't give Gu a few slashes, this guy would become bolder and bolder. It was bad enough that he didn't end the battle quickly with Bai Yanqing, but he actually had the mood to take the opportunity to scold him. Gu, there won't be a next time. Long Fei Yi said and slashed down again. The sword aura still hit Gu's head. Brother, are you crazy? Tang Li roared. Gu Beiyue leaned against the wall, lowered his head and smiled helplessly. Gu took 2 slashes in a row and squatted down in pain. From Bai Yanqing's point of view, he probably couldn't hold on and was about to collapse. He looked at the furious Long Fei Yi and was about to speak. Who knew Long Fei Yi raised the profound frost sword for the 3rd time. At this moment, Gu, who was supposed to be lying down like a corpse, actually touched his head and jumped up. He spat fiercely. Long Fei Yi, are you fucking done? It hurts. Although Gu wasn't lying down like a corpse, but when he jumped up it felt like a real corpse. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue, who knew the truth, didn't have much of a reaction. However, Tang Li and Bai Yanqing were shocked, especially Bai Yanqing. He was stunned and stared at Gu, dumbfounded. A sense of fear slowly crept into his heart. Could it be? Gu wiped the blood off his face and glanced at Long Fei Yi. 2 slashes, I'll remember it. Try talking nonsense again. Long Fei Yi wasn't afraid of him. Gu immediately turned to look at Bai Yanqing and suddenly flew over. Bai Yanqing regained his senses and immediately retreated. He questioned loudly, Gu, who are you? If you admit that you're a coward, I'll tell you. Gu snorted. Don't even think about it. Bai Yanqing immediately went up to him. He didn't believe it. He definitely didn't believe that Gu was also immortal. It must be that Long Fei Yi's 2 slashes had some kind of secret hidden in them. He had already used up all the herbs to raise the poisonous Gu human. It would take thousands of years for it to grow again. There definitely wasn't a second poisonous Gu human in this world. There definitely wasn't. He was the one and only. He pulled out his dagger. Seeing Gu coming towards him, he immediately stabbed the dagger into Gu's heart. Go to hell. Gu allowed the dagger to stab into his heart. He looked down at him from above and then kicked him away. If you can kill me, I'll call you my lord. Looking at Gu's chest that was covered in fresh blood and seeing Gu standing perfectly fine, Bai Yanqing couldn't help but believe what he saw with his own eyes. He said angrily, Who are you? How did this happen? I'm your lord. Gu didn't hesitate anymore. He pressed his hands on Bai Yanqing's shoulders. In an instant, thorny vines shot out from his arms and bound Bai Yanqing's body a few times. Bai Yanqing was shocked. He tried to break free from the thorny vines but couldn't, so he used poison on the thorny vines. He struggled violently and the poison powder scattered from his body onto Gu and the thorny vines. It's useless. Gu snorted. He retreated and used the thorny vines to wrap Bai Yanqing a few times, trapping Bai Yanqing tightly. Bai Yanqing couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that he would be tricked like this. He stopped struggling and stared at Gu in a daze. He still couldn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. Long Fei Yi made a prompt decision. Gu Beiyue, take Tang Li to find the mechanism and save them. Asking Bai Yanqing where the hostage was equivalent to asking for nothing. Finding the hostage himself was the best way. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue were about to leave when smoke suddenly came out from the cracks of the surrounding stone walls. Oh no, it's poisonous! Gu shouted. Long Fei Yi and the other 2 immediately held their breaths. Soon a group of poisonous snakes came from both sides. It was the group of poisonous snakes that could spit out poisonous gas. There are a lot of snakes, Gu said with a serious face. Not to mention that Long Fei Yi and the others couldn't hold their breaths for long. The number of poisonous snakes was enough to catch them off guard. Moreover, only God knew what other poisonous tricks Bai Yanqing had left. Coward, you said you wouldn't use poison. Tang Li scolded. Bai Yanqing remained unmoved. If he knew Gu Qishao had an undying body, he would have used poisons against him. How long had he waited for this day to make Eastern and Western Qin turn against each other? Today, no matter what kind of provocation, he wouldn't stop. Gu couldn't figure out what kind of poison the gas was, and he couldn't detoxify the snake's poison. He frowned and looked at Long Fei Yi, waiting for Long Fei Yi to make a decision. You'd better hold on. Once you're poisoned, Old Man guarantees that you'll die within the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Long Fei Yi also hesitated. What was the point of trapping Bai Yanqing but losing their lives? Suddenly, Tang Li widened his eyes and gestured vigorously at Gu Beiyue and Long Fei Yi, as if he wanted to say something. Long Fei Yi didn't understand, but Gu Beiwei immediately understood. The princess was also in the maze. As long as they held on for a while, the princess would definitely be able to find them by following the poison. There were so many poisonous snakes here, and there was also a large area of poisonous gas. The princess would definitely be able to find them soon. As long as the princess came, Bai Yanqing wouldn't be able to do anything to them. Wait. This was the only solution and also everyone's way out. Although Long Fei Yi didn't understand, when he saw Gu Beiyue's expression, he knew that they could hold on. At this moment, a poisonous snake suddenly flew towards Long Fei Yi, and then all the poisonous snakes launched a group attack. Gu was restraining Bai Yanqing and couldn't make a move. Long Fei Yi raised his sword and waved a large group of poisonous snakes back. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li immediately made a move, using Tang Li's hidden needles. They had to keep a certain distance from the poisonous snakes and then kill them to avoid being poisoned. Seeing this, Bai Yanqing only sneered. Gu rushed over and said angrily, "I'll make you wish you were dead." Gu was about to make a move, but Tang Li suddenly raised his hand and found that the skin on the back of his hand had turned black again. "Brother, I've been poisoned." Tang Li blurted out and gave up holding his breath. Seeing this, everyone was shocked. Only Bai Yanqing sneered. How could his ambush be blocked just by holding one's breath? Bai Yanqing looked at Gu with a smile. They don't have much time left. Their lives are in your hands. Chapter 11:27. Bai Yanqing's undying body wasn't what Long Fei Yi and the others were most afraid of. What they were most afraid of was Bai Yanqing's poison skills. Seeing Tang Li's blackened arm, Gu knew that Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue couldn't escape either. He said angrily to Bai Yanqing, "Antidote." "Let go of me," Bai Yanqing said slowly. Tang Li suddenly remembered something and exclaimed, "Brother, seventh young master, my sister-in-law has already escaped." "My sister-in-law has escaped. She's in the maze. She'll be here soon. As long as we hold on." Tang Li said anxiously, but as soon as he finished speaking, he was stunned and fell to his knees. His entire face was black and he couldn't speak. The poison is acting up. Gu was shocked. Han Yunqi was in the maze. The poison here was so thick she would definitely be able to find her way here soon. But they didn't have time. Tang Li's life was at stake. Long Fei Yi bent down to help him and found that his palm was also starting to turn black. He looked at Gu Beiyue and saw that Gu Beiyue was looking at his palm. There was no doubt that the poison was about to act up. Gu had no choice and didn't have any more time to waste. He said to Bai Yanqing, "Give me 2 sets of antidotes out of the 3 of us first. Otherwise, how can I trust you? If you want to bargain with old man, you can wait for Han Yunqi to rush over." Bai Yanqing sneered. He knew that Han Yunqi would be able to find her way here, but at this point he was very willing to take a gamble. Gu Beiyue suddenly fell to his knees and couldn't hold on anymore. Only Long Fei Yi was still holding on. Gu glanced at Long Fei Yi. He had no choice but to let him go. The vines immediately loosened and Bai Yanqing immediately retreated. Gu chased after him and Bai Yanqing really threw out the antidote. However, when Gu caught it, he realized that there was only one portion of the antidote. "Bai Yanqing, you're shameless." Gu was furious. Just as he was about to attack, he saw a woman running out of the darkness behind Bai Yanqing. The woman had one hand on the wall and the other on her waist. Although her dress was loose, it was obvious that her belly was bulging. Except for Bai Yanqing, who did not know what was going on, everyone was stunned. Even Gu Beiyue and Tang Li, who were kneeling on the ground, raised their heads. Long Fei Yi was the most stunned. His handsome face, which had always been cold, showed panic and helplessness that he had never shown before. This woman in front of him, this pregnant woman, was Han Yunqi. Who else could she be? His gaze slowly moved down from her face and finally landed on her slightly bulging stomach. His gaze seemed to be locked by something and would never be able to move away. At this moment, Long Fei Yi must have forgotten the dangerous situation he was in. He must have forgotten that he was poisoned. Perhaps he even forgot who he was. Although he knew that Han Yunqi was pregnant, knowing and seeing were 2 completely different experiences. Especially when he saw that she was standing perfectly fine, he was even more at a loss. He did not know what to do or what to say. Unknowingly he smiled. Looking at Han Yunqi's belly, he smiled foolishly. Bai Yanqing quickly realized that there was someone behind him. Just as he was about to turn around, Gu's thorny vines attacked again. With the experience of being tied up just now, Bai Yanqing immediately dodged and quickly realized that Han Yunqi was coming. Abominable, he cursed as he charged at Han Yunqi. When Han Yunqi saw Long Fei Yi, she wanted to pounce on him and give him a good hug, but she could not. She quickly dodged. At the same time, she threw the antidote to Long Fei Yi. Gu did not dare to use the antidote that Bai Yanqing gave him. He threw the antidote to Bai Yanqing and the thorny vines attacked again. Seeing that Bai Yanqing was about to catch Han Yunqi hurriedly dodged to the side. At the same time, the thorny vines also hit the stone wall and rebounded towards Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing could only dodge again. Han Yunqi took this opportunity and landed beside Long Fei Yi and the others. The first thing she did was to scatter a circle of powder around them to make the poisonous snakes retreat and not dare to come close. Long Fei Yi was taking the antidote. Han Yunqi glanced at him and whispered, "The children and I miss you." She did not delay, not even for a moment of tenderness. As soon as she finished speaking, she squatted down to feed Tang Li and Gu Beiyue the antidote. If it was not resolved soon, the two of them would die. Moreover, this poison could not be cured immediately with the antidote. Her antidote could only temporarily delay the time of death from the poison. Long Fei looked at her without a word, but his gaze was extremely warm and soft. "Long Fei, all of you sit down. I have to perform acupuncture immediately. You don't have much time," Han Yunqi said seriously. After seeing Han Yunqi cure the poison, everyone knew what was going on. Long Fei also sat down. Han Yunqi looked back at Gu and saw that Gu and Bai Yanqing were still fighting. After Bai Yanqing was guarded against Gu's thorny vines, it seemed that it would not be so easy for Gu to trap him. "Don't worry, he's fine," Long Fei said lightly. Han Yunqi had clearly found poison in Gu Qixiao's body as well, but why hadn't the poison flared up yet? He did not have time to think too much. Gu alone could not deal with Bai Yanqing. She had to quickly save Long Fei and the rest. Only if she joined forces with Long Fei could they restrain Bai Yanqing. "Raise your hand." "Right hand," Han Yunqi said seriously. Long Fei and the rest did as they were told. Han Yunqi did not detoxify them one by one, but the three of them detoxified the poison together. Because the time was really too short, the process of acupuncture was also the process of detoxification. In any case, it could buy some time. If she detoxified them one by one, it was very likely that the last person would not be able to be saved. That hateful Bai Yanqing, the poison he chose was really vicious. Han Yunqi was urgently detoxifying the poison when a sword aura suddenly came from behind her. She subconsciously turned around and saw Bai Yanqing's sword slashing towards Gu's head. Han Yunqi was shocked. "Gu!" She instinctively wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. The sword aura came down at full speed and fresh blood flowed from Gu's forehead. Han Yunqi was so shocked that she could not speak, and the needle in her hand fell to the ground. This should be the first time she was so careless in detoxification. "He won't die. He also has an immortal body. Detoxify quick." Long Fei had no choice but to tell the truth. Although Gu had once hoped that he could kill Bai Yanqing alone when Han Yunqi was not around, it seemed that his hopes were going to be dashed. "What?" Han Yunqi looked back in disbelief. "Detoxify quick. Gu can't trap him," Long Fei said anxiously. Han Yunqi looked over again and saw that Gu was really fine and was fighting with Bai Yanqing again. Only then did she come back to her senses. Even though she was full of confusion and shock, she could not be bothered with it for the time being. She picked up the needle and continued detoxifying at a faster speed. As she applied the needle, she whispered, "There are only 3 needles left. 7th young master must hold on." Her heart raced. Her stomach was starting to feel uncomfortable from squatting for too long, so she simply knelt. Seeing this, Long Fei's heart ached and he wanted nothing more than to carry her. But he could not. Not only could he not carry her, but he could not disturb her. Looking at Han Yunqi kneeling in front of him, he secretly swore that in this life, no matter what, even if this woman betrayed him, he would never treat her and their child unfairly. Gu and Tang Li immediately moved closer to make it easier for Han Yunqi to apply the needles. Soon another needle was done. There were only 2 needles left. She continued to search for acupoints on the hands of Long Fei and the other 2 and applied the needles one by one. The second needle was also done. There was only 1 needle left. At this moment, Gu used a thorny vine to shoot out from behind Bai Yanqing and bind Bai Yanqing's waist. Long Fei Yi and the other two were overjoyed. Long Fei Yi whispered, "Quick, Gu has trapped him." But who knew that Bai Yanqing would fiercely pull the thorny vine over and at the same time, pull Gu over and grab his neck. Gu let him grab him. The thorny vines on his hands shot out crazily and wrapped Bai Yanqing tightly. He raised his head and an unbridled smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He had won. Although he wouldn't die, he had still won. He had trapped Bai Yanqing. He would leave the rest to Long Fei Yi and Poison Girl. They would definitely take their revenge. At this moment, Han Yunxi finally finished the last needle. Long Fei wanted to pick Han Yunxi up, but he didn't dare to be as domineering as before. Instead, he carefully helped her to her feet. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li surrounded the right side while Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand and blocked the left side. At this moment, Bai Yanqing and Gu were hugging each other. Both of them were bound by thorny vines. Gu yanked Bai Yanqing's hand away and tilted his head to look at Han Yunxi. He smiled brightly. "Poison Girl, isn't Chi brother powerful?" Han Yunxi and the others didn't dare to let down their guard. Even Han Yunxi didn't dare to ask about Gu's body. They had to find a safe way to truly trap Bai Yanqing. Tang Li quickly took out a coil of rope. This was the work of the Tang sect elders over the past few months. This rope was made of a special material. It was very similar to the hidden thread but much thicker. It was used to bind people's limbs. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to break free. The name of this rope was given by Mrs. Tang. It was called the Death Reaper rope. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue took the rope and were about to act when Bai Yanqing suddenly stomped his foot. "Careful!" Tang Li was the first to react. He instinctively grabbed Gu's hand. Unfortunately, it was too late. The place where Gu and Bai Yanqing were standing suddenly caved in. The two of them fell down. It seemed to be very deep. Tang Li immediately rushed down to take a look, but he couldn't see anyone. "There are many traps here. Everyone be careful." Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand tightly. "What's going on?" Han Yunxi couldn't hold it in anymore. "Brother Gu, he's also a poison Gu human?" Tang Li asked anxiously. He had wanted to ask just now. "I only know that he has an immortal body. As for whether he's a poison Gu human, that's up to him. He won't die. He might even be able to trap Bai Yanqing for a while. We have to find hostages immediately," Long Fei Yi said seriously. "Yes, we don't have to worry about 7th Young Master. Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu are in different directions. It's best if we don't split up. We don't have much time. Sect Master Tang, there should be a secret chamber in the stone room. Let's hurry and find it," Gu Beiyue said anxiously. Han Yunxi knew the situation was urgent, but she couldn't take her eyes off the pitch-black hole beneath her feet. She was too shocked by this truth. 7th Young Master won't die. Chapter 11:28. She stared at the deep hole beneath her feet, her heart stuffy with an indescribable discomfort. No wonder Gu always said that he wouldn't die. It turned out that "I won't die" wasn't a joke, nor was it Gu's arrogance. It was his truth. Was he a poison Gu human? A poison Gu human raised by Gu Yuntian? But the medicine used to raise poison Gu humans was long gone. If Gu was a poison Gu human, he should know Bai Yanqing very well. A terrifying thought flashed through Han Yunxi's mind, and this thought made her even more upset. What would be at the bottom of such a deep hole? Even if Gu didn't die, he would still be in pain. "Don't worry," Long Fei Yi said indifferently. "Princess, 7th Young Master should be fine. It's more important to find him," Gu Beiyue also advised. Tang Li was anxious about Ning Jing and had already started searching to the right. He circled around the stone room. The mechanism must be in this circle. Han Yunxi knew that the situation was urgent. She restrained her thoughts and said, "Follow Tang Li, don't let him go alone. There are a lot of poisonous creatures and traps here." Gu Beiyue chased after him. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand tightly and followed behind. Where Gu and Bai Yanqing went, and how long Gu could trap Bai Yanqing, everything was still unknown. Rescuing the hostages was the most important thing. Otherwise, even if they caught Bai Yanqing, they would definitely be restrained. Tang Li walked very carefully and didn't miss any places where there might be hidden mechanisms. Gu Beiyue stood guard behind him, his entire body on guard in case anything unexpected happened. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi followed closely. However, not long after, Long Fei could not take it anymore. He suddenly stopped and pulled Han Yunqi into his arms and hugged her. His words were on the tip of his tongue, but he didn't have time to say them. He didn't know what to say either, so he simply said, "Yunqi, I'm sorry." Han Yunqi was slightly stunned. She could clearly hear the sobs in Long Fei's voice. How serious was this apology? She originally thought that he would question her about why she didn't tell him that she was pregnant. She even wanted to explain that she was confused about the situation. Who would have thought that he didn't reprimand or question her at all? He only said, "I'm sorry." She was both touched and distressed. Just as she was about to hug him tightly, he immediately let go. The hostages had not been rescued yet, and everyone was still in a dangerous situation. What right did the two of them have to hug? What right did he have to hug her for so long? They still held hands and followed Tang Li and the others forward while paying attention to the movements around them. However, Han Yunqi couldn't help it. She suddenly stopped and turned to hug Long Fei. It was only for a moment before she let go. Long Fei wanted to hug her again, but he couldn't. "Idiot, it's not like it's your fault." Han Yunqi spoke in a low voice as she gently placed his hand on her stomach. "If we're sorry, then it's us who've wronged this little fellow. When he's born, we'll properly apologize to him." As soon as Long Fei touched Han Yunqi's swollen belly, he immediately tensed up. He was so nervous that he couldn't keep walking forward. He was so nervous that he didn't even listen to Han Yunqi's words. Han Yunqi clearly felt his hand tremble slightly when it touched her belly. Heavens, this fellow had never seen so much of the world. Just how nervous was he to make his hand tremble? Although his hand was trembling, he didn't let go when Han Yunqi tried to remove his hand. Instead, he gently placed his hand on her belly. This guy who was as mighty as a god and as cold as an Azura couldn't be a child slave, right? At this moment, Han Yunqi was suddenly very worried that she was pregnant with a girl. If that was the case, she would be jealous of this little fellow. She was still in her mother's womb, yet Long Fei was already so nervous. What would happen if she was born? Wouldn't Long Fei spoil her to the skies? Han Yunqi decisively pushed Long Fei's hand away and said seriously, "Let's go. Careful. You me first. Let me hug you properly later." Long Fei could only hold her hand and continue walking forward. He wasn't giving in, but he was enduring. After all, this wasn't the time for a family of three to be affectionate. Suddenly, Tang Li stopped and said in surprise, "It's here. There's a switch." He carefully lifted up a brick and saw that it was hollow under it. There was a wooden valve. Tang Li immediately went to pull the valve, but Long Fei stopped him. "Wait. Check it first." Tang Li immediately stopped. There was bound to be an ambush near any switch. Tang Li must have been overjoyed. He turned back and smiled at Long Fei. "Okay, I'll check it now." How long had it been since he had seen Tang Li's good-looking and pure smile? Tang Li was so happy that he almost screamed. When he thought about how he would be able to see Ning Jing after activating the switch, he was excited. When he saw Ning Jing, he would definitely tell her what was on his mind. The words that he had been hiding in his heart for a long time, and the words that he had been preparing for a long time. He wanted to let her know how much he loved her. Tang Li was both nervous and excited as he searched around the valve for a long time. Finally, he found a very thin line. Just as he was about to pull it, Han Yunqi quickly pulled him away. "There's poison, be careful." "Sister-in-law, this is a double switch. This line has to be activated together with the valve. If the valve is activated alone or this line is activated alone, the hidden weapon hidden in the wall will shoot out. The wall here is not thick, so there should be hidden needles," Tang Li explained. "There's poison on the line. You pull the valve and I'll pull the line. I'll count to 3 and we'll pull it together," Han Yunqi said seriously. The two of them pulled the switch at the same time and a rumbling sound came from the stone room. Tang Li was extremely surprised. He ran into the stone room in a flash. Gu Beiyue watched him closely, almost like a shadow. Han Yunqi wanted to chase after him, but Long Fei stopped her. "Don't run, I'll carry you." Although they could not be intimate in this situation, Long Fei still had to take care of Han Yunqi, who was pregnant, no matter how urgent the situation was. "It's okay, I'll use Qinggong, I won't run. It's been more than 5 months and it's basically stable. 4th Miss Ren's miscarriage prevention medicine is very effective, don't worry," Han Yunqi said. Gu Beiyue had already determined that she had completely recovered from the miscarriage. Otherwise, Long Fei Yi would have directly carried her and not let her go. Long Fei Yi did not answer her. He held her waist and wanted to use Qinggong to carry her away. However, when he held her waist, he found that Han Yunqi basically did not have a waist. If it was in the past, his arms would wrap around her from behind, and his big palm would wrap around her flat waist tightly, and he would immediately be able to carry her away. However, at this moment, his big hand was not covering her beautiful waist, but the slightly bulging edge of her lower abdomen. The moment Long Fei Yi touched this place, he became nervous again. He did not dare to use any strength, not even a little bit. Han Yunqi felt that his big hand was stiff and snickered. He took her hand away and said seriously, "It's okay, I know what I'm doing. Trust me." Long Fei Yi stretched out his leg and said coldly, "Step on it and hug me." His tone was commanding and his gaze was even more so. At this moment Tang Li's voice was heard. "Brother, sister-in-law, come and see." Han Yunqi had no choice but to step on Long Fei Yi's right leg and hug him. Once she hugged him tightly, Long Fei Yi exerted force with his other leg, and in an instant they were in the stone room. Han Yunqi had to admit that it was faster to let him carry her. Although she could use Qinggong, she did not dare to use too much force, which affected her speed. Otherwise, she would have rushed over as soon as she detected the poison. As soon as Long Fei Yi landed, Han Yunqi hurriedly got down from his leg, afraid that she would hurt him. After all, she was not alone now. She was also carrying the weight of a child. In the stone room, Gu Beiyue and Tang Li were looking at a mezzanine on the wall. "What's going on?" Long Fei Yi walked over. "There's a secret room inside." Tang Li's eyes were obviously disappointed, but he did not give up. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi walked closer and found that there was a hole at the bottom right of the mezzanine that could only accommodate one person. From the looks of it, when Bai Yanqing was fighting with them, Ning Jing had already been taken away by his subordinates. "Let's hope the seventh young master can still trap Bai Yanqing," Gu Beiyue said seriously. "I'll go down first and take a look." "No, I'll go down." Tang Li stopped him. Everyone knew he wanted to save Ning Jing personally. However, he could not take the risk in an unknown hole like this. After all, Bai Yanqing and Gu had also fallen into a hole, and the two holes were extremely close to each other. Who knew whether they were connected or not? "It's too dangerous. I'd better go down," Gu Beiyue said seriously. "Stop struggling. There's no poison down there." Bai Yanqing and Gu should have fallen extremely deep, as I can't detect the poison in Gu's body anymore. "North Moon is faster, so let's let North Moon go down," Han Yunqi said. Her casual mention of North Moon added a sense of familiarity and intimacy. No one noticed it, and Han Yunqi was even more unaware. However, Gu Beiyue noticed it. He said nothing. He picked up the lantern on the wall, glanced down and jumped down. Tang Li still kept an eye out. He inserted a needle and thread into Gu Beiyue's sleeve, just in case he got lost. From the thread in Tang Li's sleeve, the hole should be extremely deep. After quite a while, the thread that was constantly being pulled down finally stopped. "It's extremely deep." Long Fei Yi was very surprised. He called out, "Gu Beiyue, how's the situation?" "It should be safe. This is a passageway. You can come down," Gu Beiyue answered loudly. Tang Li jumped down first, while Long Fei Yi directly pried open the rock at the entrance. He carried Han Yunqi and the two of them jumped down together. At the bottom of the hole was a secret passageway that was wide enough for one person to pass through. It was around the height of a person. For someone of Long Fei Yi's height, they would even have to bend over slightly. Moving around here was not convenient at all. In other words, if someone wanted to launch a sneak attack on them right now, it would be extremely easy for them to succeed. Of course, Han Yunqi had always been cautious. Before she came down, she had scattered a ring of poison powder around the entrance. Bai Yanqing could nullify her poison, but the poison masters under Bai Yanqing's command were definitely trash before her poison. Forward. Long Fei Yi pondered. It should be the entrance to the secret room. Long Fei Yi's sense of direction was definitely unmatched. Could not be wrong. Gu Beiyue smiled. "Your Highness, I'm afraid I've gone in the wrong direction. I landed facing the entrance to the stone room. I'm sure of it." Everyone was rather doubtful. Was this secret passageway the same one that Bai Yanqing and Gu had landed in? "Go. Everyone be careful," Long Fei Yi said seriously. Gu Beiyue walked at the front. The four of them formed a straight line and carefully walked forward. What would they encounter? Chapter 11:29. Long Fei Ye's group of 4 walked forward. They had only taken a few steps when Han Yunqi whispered, "There's poison in front, but it's not very strong. Seems like someone has been poisoned, but it doesn't seem like it." Danger? Long Fei Yi asked. "No, it's not poisonous gas. It's not a big deal. It's the same poison that you were just poisoned with. Let's go and take a look," Han Yunqi said seriously. As they walked forward, they could faintly smell a foul stench. "What's that smell?" Tang Li turned around. "Sister-in-law, is this smell not poisonous?" "No. It smells a bit like the smell of a rotting corpse." Han Yunqi was also puzzled. This smell was very strange, but the detoxification system did not remind her. "Gu Beiyue, be careful in front," Long Fei Yi said. About the distance of the stone room, Han Yunqi and the rest found a fist-sized hole on the right side of the secret passage. Gu Beiyue carefully poked his head out to take a look and immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He hurriedly looked back. "Princess, it's not poison. There's a big situation inside. What's going on? What did you see?" Han Yunqi was a little uneasy. She was afraid that something had happened to Gu and Ningjing. This secret passage was too narrow. It could only accommodate one person at a time. They could only see what was going on if Gu Beiyue continued to walk forward. Gu Beiyue immediately used his fist to smash open the stone wall. Who knew that with this smash the wall collapsed inwards? Inside was a small circular secret room. Light shone down from above. It turned out that this was the place where Gu and Bai Yanqing fell. It was indeed connected to this secret passage. Everyone was shocked when they saw the scene inside. Rather than calling it a secret room, it was more like a terrifying trap. There were 6 large iron pillars in the sealed secret room. Countless scissors were tied to the pillars and the blades were all facing outwards. It looked like a huge cactus. The 6 large steel blades formed a circle in the circular secret room, maintaining the same rhythm and rotating at an extremely fast speed. In this way, the entire secret room, whether it was the area within the circle formed by the 6 iron pillars or the area outside the circle, was constantly swept by countless blades. In other words, this secret chamber was a terrifying meat grinder. No matter what intruded, it would be instantly chopped into pieces. "Look at the wall," Tang Li exclaimed. All 3 walls were stained with blood and countless pieces of flesh were stuck to them. There were pieces of flesh of all sizes. It was obvious that some of the blood and flesh on the wall were fresh. In other words, someone had just been torn to pieces here. Han Yunqi looked uncomfortable. She couldn't help but want to vomit several times. Tang Li, on the other hand, suddenly screamed and threw up on the side. He probably wouldn't dare to eat meat for a long time. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue were very calm. They seriously looked around the secret room. Han Yunqi resisted the nausea and once again activated the detoxification system to check carefully. She confirmed that the poison had come from these pieces of flesh. It was no wonder that the detoxification system couldn't make an accurate judgment. It could only determine that someone had been poisoned. This result made Han Yunqi's heart inexplicably panic. She asked very seriously, "Long Fei Yi, are you sure that Gu, he has an immortal body?" "Yes, you saw it with your own eyes just now." Long Fei Yi was very sure. But someone was just torn to pieces here. That person was also poisoned." "It's the same poison that you were poisoned with," Han Yunqi muttered. Bai Yanqing's subordinates must have taken precautions. The only ones who wouldn't be poisoned were Long Fei Yi and the other 3. He was too afraid. Afraid that the person who was torn to pieces on the wall wasn't someone else, but Gu. When she said that, Long Fei Yi and the other 2 looked at each other. He could even withstand the profound frost sword chi, what more these blades? Long Fei Yi asked seriously. At this time Tang Li suddenly exclaimed, "Ningjing! Ningjing!" Just now the poison gas came from the wall and spread throughout the entire area. If Ningjing was nearby, it was very likely that she would also be poisoned. Could it be that after Bai Yanqing used Ningjing, he threw Ningjing into this meat grinder secret room? Tang Li looked at everyone in shock. Everyone didn't react for a moment. Tang Li suddenly shouted and was about to rush into the secret room. Fortunately, Long Fei Yi blocked him with his body and pushed him to the opposite wall. Coldly he said, "It's just a suspicion. Why are you in such a hurry to die?" This was such a terrifying meat grinder. Once he broke in, death would happen in an instant. No one would be able to save him. Suspicion. It's just a suspicion. Tang Li muttered to himself. Han Yunxi stood beside Tang Li. She had to admit that she was also a little flustered. Whether it was Gu or Ning Jing, she couldn't accept this cruel reality. She only hoped that this was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Gu Beiyue threw out a few small flying knives. Although the flying knives were small, their strength was great. One by one, the 6 iron pillars were all knocked askew and hit the wall. As a result, the iron pillars stopped moving. This terrifying meat grinder array was also broken. Gu Beiyue walked in carefully. Seeing that there were no traps, he turned around and nodded to Long Fei Yi. It's okay. Gu Beiyue and Long Fei Yi still remained calm and collected. Let's go up and see if it's connected to the hole that Gu fell from, Long Fei Yi said seriously. If Gu and Bai Yanqing really fell here, how did they disappear? It was unlikely that Gu would let go of Bai Yanqing. 2 people tied together in this secret room, how could they walk out? Who was the person who was hanged? Where were Gu and Bai Yanqing? They had to figure out these 2 questions. Gu Beiyue immediately flew up. Long Fei Yi pressed a hand on Tang Li's shoulder to prevent him from doing anything stupid. Seeing Han Yunxi's frown and worried expression, he finally couldn't help but frown. The only people who could make him worry were his younger brother Tang Li and his woman Han Yunxi. Of course, now there was another little girl. He rubbed Han Yunxi's brows and said seriously, "Both of you cheer up. Gu won't die. Bai Yanqing didn't kill the hostages before, so there's no reason for him to kill them at this juncture." Han Yunxi and Tang Li didn't answer. They couldn't understand. If it wasn't Gu and Ning Jing, then who was the one who was hanged after being poisoned? Bai Yanqing wouldn't be so stupid and cruel as to poison his own subordinates to death. Soon Gu Beiyue came back. He said seriously, "It's this cave. That's right, it leads to the door of the stone chamber. Tang Li, go and see if there are any traps in those 3 walls, Long Fei Yi said seriously. If the entrance to the secret chamber was only the one above their head, then the pieces of flesh on the wall were too strange. If there were other entrances, then it wouldn't be surprising. Han Yunxi pulled herself together first. She patted Tang Li's shoulder and comforted him. "Tang Li, your brother is right. Bai Yanqing wouldn't kill the hostages at this juncture." Tang Li exhaled deeply and strode into the secret chamber to check carefully. Gu Beiyue stood beside him and used a small golden knife to pry open the disgusting pieces of flesh on the wall. Tang Li soon came to a conclusion. The 3 walls were completely sealed. If they weren't broken, they wouldn't be able to enter at all. "Step back. Let me take a look at this wall," Tang Li said in a low voice. The wall that was destroyed by Gu Beiyue had almost collapsed, but this didn't stop Tang Li from checking. He fumbled around for a while and finally came to a conclusion. This is a movable door. The people who were hanged probably came in through this movable door, Han Yunxi said. Gu tied Bai Yanqing up like that. How did they get out of the secret chamber when they fell? How did they continue to move forward? Bai Yanqing made a guess. Bai Yanqing broke free from the thorny vines? His subordinates came to attack Gu and were thrown into the secret chamber to be hanged? Bai Yanqing's subordinates couldn't have been poisoned, right? Tang Li immediately retorted. At this moment, Gu Beiyue, who had been examining the pieces of flesh, opened his mouth and said, "Look, what is this?" His expression was very serious. He held a small golden knife and picked out a copper coin from a pile of sticky flesh. There was a red string tied to the copper coin. What is this? Tang Li didn't understand. If it was a normal copper coin, there wouldn't be a red string tied to it. This should be a pendant. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi recognized it at a glance. Han Yunxi strode forward and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood off the copper coin. There was a flame imprint on the copper coin. It's Gu's. He was very sure. This was given to Gu by the old man of alchemy. Gu had returned it back at the medicine requesting cave. Later on, when the old man of alchemy went to the Tang sect, he asked the shadow guard to return it to Gu. At the time, Gu wanted to give it to her, but she rejected him. Did this copper coin fall from Gu's body or? Han Yunxi was looking up when Gu Beiyue picked out a piece of red silk from the pile of flesh. Gu Beiyue's brows were heavy as he said seriously, "This material is top-grade heavenly cicada silk. It's warm in the winter and cool in the summer. I've only seen it on 7th Young Master." Bai Yanqing's subordinates were all dressed in black. Where did this red silk come from? Moreover, how could Bai Yanqing's subordinates have such a luxurious item? Even if they had money, they might not be able to get it. This red material was the material of Gu's demonic red robes. Han Yunxi and the others fell silent. Even Long Fei Yi, who had always been at odds with Gu, revealed a worried expression. Could it be that the clothes and copper coins fell from the top during the fight with Bai Yanqing? Han Yun suddenly asked. However, even she herself found it laughable when she said it. Long Fei Yi and the others didn't answer her either. Long Fei Yi began to doubt his own guess. Gu had gone to great lengths to trap Bai Yanqing. How could he let go so easily? Gu wasn't stupid. This was Bai Yanqing's territory. Once he let go, he would be at a disadvantage. Moreover, he still had to trap Bai Yanqing to buy time for them to rescue the hostages. Those thorny vines grew from Gu's arm and absorbed Gu's blood. Just like Gu, they couldn't be burned, poisoned, or cut off. Bai Yanqing wouldn't be able to break free either. Unless something happened to Gu. Chapter 1130. Gu Beiyue had been inspecting for a long time. In fact, he had not only seen the copper coins and red silk, but also something else that could definitely prove that it was Gu's. Although he was very unwilling, Gu Beiyue still picked out a small section of the thorny vine hidden in the pile of flesh and placed it in his palm. Seeing this, Han Yunxi immediately covered her mouth and looked to the side. It was as if the thorny vine would not exist if she did not look. However, the truth was the truth. Gu Beiyue wanted to check the bloodstains to make a final conclusion. Gu's blood was different from ordinary people's, so he could still recognize it. However, the blood was contaminated by poison, so he could not do anything about it. Now there were only 3 things in front of him: the copper coins, the red silk, and the thorny vine. The thorny vine and Gu were one. If the thorny vine was destroyed, then what about Gu? I don't believe it. Han Yunxi suddenly rushed into the secret room. She directly used her hands to check the piles of mangled flesh and blood. After checking 2 large piles, she did not find the red silk or the thorny vine. This gave her hope, and it also gave Long Fei Yi and Tang Li hope. They followed Han Yunxi to check, ignoring the dirt and disgust. As long as Gu was fine, no matter how dirty or disgusting it was, it did not matter. However, the results were disappointing and even devastating. They created a pile of broken thorny vines, found a large pile of red silk fragments, and even found a pile of broken bones. Suddenly, Tang Li screamed. He dug out a head with disheveled hair from a pile of bones that had been there for a long time. When Han Yunxi turned back, she saw a face whose features had been completely disfigured beyond recognition. Ah! She screamed and subconsciously turned around to escape. Long Fei Yi quickly protected her in his arms. He did not know how to comfort her. Han Yunxi has seen and examined corpses, no matter how disgusting and unrecognizable they are. She is born to be a doctor, so she is not afraid of these things. What she was afraid of was, she was afraid of recognizing something familiar from that frightening face. She was afraid that she would recognize Gu's face. Han Yunxi buried her head in Long Fei Ye's arms. She did not want to continue searching. She did not want to. She asked in a choked voice, Long Fei Yi, how did you know that Gu is immortal? There are only a few herbs that can be used to cultivate Gu poison. How did Gu become a poisonous Gu human? I can't kill him? Long Fei Yi replied indifferently. Gu Beiyue's tone was incomparably heavy. 7th young master is not a poisonous Gu human. His body's abnormality must be related to the medicine he started using in his mother's womb. Perhaps Gu Beiyue tried some medicine and accidentally caused it. Gu Beiyue had actually wanted to study Gu's constitution for a long time. It was just that he did not have the time, and Gu might not be willing to do so either. He did not want to research an elixir of immortality. He just wanted to figure out what was going on with Gu's body. After all, Gu was the only one who discovered that he was immortal. There was no clear evidence. Even Gu himself was not completely clear about his own body. Perhaps he would grow old, but it would take a longer time. Perhaps he would fall sick, but he had not encountered a virus that could cause illness. Perhaps he would also die, but he had not encountered a way to kill him. Perhaps this meat grinder secret room would not leave his corpse behind. Even a poisonous Gu human like Bai Yanqing could be neutralized by the perplexing butterfly illusion, let alone Gu. Han Yunxi glanced at the collapsed steel pillars and muttered, if the perplexing butterfly illusion can destroy Bai Yanqing, then can it destroy Shao Qi? Long Fei Yi, you can't kill him with one slash? What about 100 slashes? 1,000? Han Yunshi was choked with sobs. Each of these 6 steel pillars was densely packed with at least 100 sharp swords. Even 1,000 cuts couldn't compare to this, right? Long Fei Yi did not reply. Just like Gu Beiyue, he was also asking himself the same question. If the perplexing butterfly illusion could kill Bai Yanqing, would this 1,000 cuts be able to kill Gu? Tell me. Tell me. Han Yunshi finally could not control herself and roared angrily. You all know that Gu has an immortal body, why didn't you tell me? Do you take me for a fool? Why didn't you tell me? Why? Han Yunshi pushed Long Fei Yi away and glared at them. If she had known that Gu had an immortal body, she would have brought Gu to Medical City and had Gu Beiyue examine him properly. She would have gone to the prison and interrogated Shao Qi about what drugs he had used on Shao Qi back then, and why he had turned Shao Qi into such a monstrous body. At least they had to figure out whether Gu was truly immortal and indestructible, and whether Gu had any misgivings or weaknesses with such a body. Even a poisonous Gu human has a fatal weakness, let alone him. Han Yunshi's eyes were red. Why didn't you tell me? Why? Sister-in-law, I don't know either. I don't know either. Gu must have prevented my brother and North Moon from telling you. That must be it. Tang Li comforted her in a hurry. Sister-in-law, don't be angry. It's not good for the baby. Or maybe it's really like what my brother said. The clothes might have fallen off. The copper coins might have fallen off too. The bramble vines. When Tang Li mentioned the bramble vines, he could not even continue. He could not explain. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue could clearly explain, but neither of them said anything, allowing Han Yunshi to interrogate them. Long Fei Yi had promised Gu, while Gu Beiyue had always known that Gu was unwilling to publicize this matter. As a matter of fact, when they entered the maze, Gu had even lamented to him in private. If only he could encounter Bai Yanqing first and trap him, he would not have to expose his secret. They did not explain as they knew Han Yunshi was only upset. He did not actually blame them. Han Yunshi had only yelled at them a few times before settling down very soon. She was so quiet that tears streamed down her face. She looked at her blood-soaked hand and tears slowly streamed down her face. Long Fei Yi did not try to persuade her. He looked away. His heart also felt particularly heavy. The room was silent. Only the stench of decay fermented in the air, becoming more and more unbearable. However, the 4 people present had all overlooked it. They had even overlooked their dangerous situation. Gu Qishao was dead? He was gone. Han Yunshi refused to believe this reality, but her blood-soaked hand had already blurred in her vision. She could not find an excuse to refute the cruel reality. Tears streamed down her cheeks without a sound, while Long Fei and the rest were silent and somber. None of them could speak. However, it was exactly this silence that allowed a sound that had always been there to gradually become clearer. Dong dong dong. Long Fei Yi was the first to notice the sound. He quickly brought Han Yunshi out of the secret room and signaled to Gu Beiyue and Tang Li with his eyes. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li also quickly noticed that something was wrong. The sound was coming from underground. Han Yunshi also noticed it, but she only took a glance. She really could not think of anything right now. She really wanted to bury her head in Long Fei Ye's arms and have a good sleep. Perhaps when she woke up she would realize that everything was just a dream. Everyone was still fine. Tang Li listened carefully and said in a low voice, "It's not the sound of a mechanism. Someone is knocking on it. There's a secret room below?" Long Fei Yi was suspicious. If that was the case, the person knocking on the wall was definitely not Bai Yanqing's people. It was very likely that one of their people was asking for help. Who could it be? Could it be Ning Jing? Tang Li quickly went in to look for the mechanism. He had just checked the 4 walls, but he forgot about the floor. Tang Li spent a lot of effort and finally found the mechanism. This mechanism was an 8 trigrams mechanism. He said in a low voice, "Brother, come over and help me." Long Fei Yi did not go over. Instead, it was Gu Beiyue who walked over. Long Fei Yi was still protecting Han Yunshi, who was extremely disappointed. Han Yunshi just looked at him blankly and did not move. Tang Li wiped away the bloodstains on the ground. A yin-yang 8 trigrams diagram was revealed on the circular ground, and the 2 dots on the 8 trigrams were where the mechanism was located. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue each pressed on one of the dots. With a light press, The yin and yang on the 8 trigrams moved to the left and right. They stood on both sides of the yin and yang and were then moved away. There was indeed a small secret room underground. To be exact, it was a small cave that could only accommodate 1 or 2 people. They saw Gu squatting down there with his head raised. He waved at them and smiled at them. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue were stunned. They were so surprised that they could not speak. Tang Li suddenly turned to look at his brother and sister-in-law. He could only smile. "Is that Ning Jing?" Long Fei Yi asked. Tang Li shook his head. Although it was not Ning Jing, he was still very, very happy to see Gu. If it was not Ning Jing, could it be? Gu! Han Yunxi exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Qishao rose to his feet and jumped out. He was wearing a thin white undershirt and looked very pathetic. Instead of saying that it was a white undershirt, it was better to say that it was a bloody shirt. His whole body was full of cuts and bloodstains. There was almost no unscathed skin on his body. It was obvious that he had been injured by the knives on the metal pillar. Still, he stood there as tall as ever, his smile as beautiful as a flower. He chuckled at Han Yunxi and said, "Poison lass, do you think Chi Gija's dead? If Chi brother's death could be exchanged for a few tears from you, it would be worth it." Han Yunxi stared at him in a daze. She rubbed her eyes carelessly to see more clearly. She was afraid that she had seen wrongly and that this was not real. Shaoqi was not dead. As for Long Fei Yi, although he secretly heaved a sigh of relief, he was already rolling his eyes. But when Gu Qishao drew closer and took a closer look at Han Yunxi, he saw that her eyes were red and swollen. Immediately he grew anxious. "Poison lass, Chi Gija's perfectly fine. He won't die. Don't cry for real." Gu pulled at his blood-stained sleeve to help Han Yunxi wipe her tears, but Long Fei Yi immediately kicked him away. Long Fei Yi would never admit that his heart had been heavy just now. He asked coldly, "Where is Bai Yanqing? How did you end up being locked down?" Han Yunxi was both happy and distressed. She looked at Gu's wounds and murmured, "Seventh young master, it hurts a lot, doesn't it?" Chapter 1131. Of course it hurts. Gu was most afraid of pain. Poison lass asked him in tears, "It hurts a lot, doesn't it?" It was enough to hear her say that in this lifetime. It hurts so much. Gu was telling the truth. Unfortunately, he still chuckled. "It hurts so much that I'm almost out of strength. Otherwise, Bai Yanqing wouldn't have slipped away. It really hurts too much." Although he had been enduring and holding on, he still couldn't hold on in the end. What a shameful thing this was, what an embarrassing thing to talk about. He really didn't want to admit it. What exactly happened? Long Fei Yi asked. Gu was about to answer when Long Fei Yi added, "Are you really okay?" Gu's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly ignored it. He pursed his lips and explained, "When Bai Yanqing and I fell down, we landed in the middle of those iron pillars and were slashed by knives. Later, the door to the secret room opened and 2 of Bai Yanqing's servants ran in, asking Bai Yanqing to help them detoxify the poison. It must have been the poisonous gas that leaked down." Everyone was very thoughtful. They didn't expect Bai Yanqing to be such a jerk. In order to kill them with poison, he didn't even care about the lives of his subordinates. Tang Li couldn't help but interrupt while listening at the side. "Seventh young master, have you seen Ning Jing?" "No." Gu shrugged. Seeing that Tang Li didn't say anything else, he continued to explain. He and Bai Yanqing had been in the secret room for a while and couldn't stand the pain anymore. There were too many knives. Actually, he would feel pain if he cut the thorny vines. Those knives didn't just cut the thorny vines but also his body. He really couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to escape from the secret room when he let go of Bai Yanqing and tie him up again. Thus, he first broke the connection between his arm and the thorny vines, and at the same time stopped the vines from absorbing his blood. Unfortunately, the moment the vines were cut off, they were immediately cut into pieces by the knives. His and Bai Yanqing's clothes were also cut into pieces. Both of them were injured all over. Bai Yanqing, once he regained his freedom, he activated the mechanism and trapped him in the underground secret room. As for where Bai Yanqing escaped to, he didn't know. If they hadn't found him, he would probably have been trapped for the rest of his life. Hearing Gu Qishao's explanation, everyone exhaled. So that's how it was. No wonder he saw so many broken vines and pieces of red silk as well as the copper coin. The bits and pieces of flesh were probably left behind by Bai Yanqing's poison guards who had blocked his escape route before he tossed them inside. I'm sorry, hee I couldn't hold on. If I knew you guys were going to come down, this old man would have held on a bit longer, Gu Qixiao said apologetically, but didn't have the attitude to do so. Actually, he was really apologetic. He had already slapped himself a few times while he was trapped underground. He was just trying to hide his embarrassment and uselessness with an indifferent look, but he didn't expect Long Fei Yi to say lightly, "No one can stand being cut into pieces. It's not your fault." Gu glanced at him suspiciously. He couldn't help but think if he really died one day, would this guy feel a little bit upset? Han Yunxi handed the copper coin to Gu and said seriously, "Keep it well. This thing is here, you're here." Gu didn't even realize that he had dropped this thing. Although he was trapped underground and couldn't hear the voices above clearly, he could only hear some movement. However, looking at the bloodstains on Han Yunxi's hands and the pile of red silk's fragments and thorny vines, he knew what had happened. He looked seriously at Han Yunxi's red eyes, then looked at Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue and the rest. He couldn't help but snicker secretly. Damn, why did he suddenly feel so blessed? Gu felt blessed, but Han Yunxi and the rest had a false alarm. Han Yunxi's heart ached, but she didn't want to joke around with him anymore. She said seriously, "Gu, what's wrong with your body? Could he run rampant in the world just because he was immortal? Could he be hacked by anyone just because he was immortal? If he didn't figure out his body, his taboos and his weaknesses, he might not even know how he died." Gu was resentful. Only then did he realize that Poison Lass already knew his secret. He avoided her scrutinizing gaze and coughed lightly, pretending to be relaxed. "I'm just a freak. I won't die, don't worry." Before Han Yunxi could speak, Gu Beiyue took the opportunity to persuade him. "Seventh young master, even poison Gu humans have weaknesses, let alone you." Since the princess knew about this, they naturally had to take this opportunity to persuade Gu to face the fact that he was immortal. Gu Beiyue knew that Gu wouldn't listen to anyone, but he definitely wouldn't reject the princess' request. Long Fei Yi also tried to persuade Gu, but he advised him in this way. He said coldly, "Gu, you have to see a doctor if you're sick." Tang Li also wanted to persuade him, but after hearing his brother's words, he silently shut his mouth. He felt that any persuasion would be superfluous in front of his brother's words. Gu looked over coldly. Just as he was about to quarrel with Long Fei Yi again, Han Yunxi said seriously, "What's wrong with your bramble vines? Why do you feel pain when you're injured by them?" Han Yunxi was puzzled when she heard Gu's explanation just now. When Gu was burned in Qingchuan Water City, he wasn't burned because he used bramble vines to bind himself. She had always believed that he was protected by bramble vines. She also thought that his bramble vines were a special plant that didn't fear fire. Now it seemed that she had been deceived that time. The reason why Gu wasn't burned to death wasn't because of the bramble vines' protection. Instead, it was because the bramble vines had absorbed his blood and possessed the same immortal and indestructible body as him. That was why he wasn't burned by the fire and his body wasn't burned by the fire. Now it seemed that the bramble vines and Gu were completely connected. When the bramble vines were injured or burned, Gu would feel pain. How did the bramble vines seed end up in Gu's arm? How did they absorb his blood and grow so quickly? Why did they have an empathic relationship with Gu just by absorbing Gu's blood? Would Gu feel pain when the bramble vines were injured? Thinking about it this way, the bramble vines seemed to be a part of Gu's body. If it wasn't the bramble vines but another plant, would it have the same effect? What did this have to do with Gu's special body and blood? Thinking up to this point, Han Yunxi felt a vague sense of familiarity. She felt like she'd encountered similar problems somewhere before. However, she couldn't think of anything at the moment. Plants. Han Yunxi remembered that an old professor in medical school once said, "Plants are the real powerhouses of nature. They can live for thousands or even tens of thousands of years." Gu interrupted Han Yunxi's train of thought and said helplessly, Okay. When we get out, I'll lie on Gu Beiyue's consultation table and let him study me however he wants. Is that okay? Let's hurry up and find him." As he spoke, he tilted his head and said to Tang Li, "Are you anxious?" Tang Li nodded vigorously. Of course, Han Yunxi was also anxious to find Ning Jing and Gu Beiyue. She just wanted to force Gu to make a promise. She said to Gu Beiyue, "If he dares to escape, you have to bring him back even if he has to go to the ends of the earth." "Yes, Your Highness," Gu Beiyue said seriously. "Looks like Bai Yanqing escaped from the front. Let's go back," Long Fei Yi said lightly. Bai Yanqing had escaped far away. They weren't familiar with the situation here, and it wasn't wise to chase after someone in such a narrow secret room. Even if they knew that Ning Jing had been taken away through this secret passage, they couldn't chase after her. If there was an ambush ahead, they would be in danger. They had to leave this secret passage quickly and discuss how to find her. After a while, Long Fei Yi and the others successfully retreated to the stone room above. Seeing how Han Yunxi's emotions fluctuated so much and how tired she was, Long Fei Yi was truly worried. Just when he was about to ask Gu Beiyue passed him a pill first. "Your Highness, please let the princess ingest this. It'll nourish her body and stabilize her pregnancy just in case." Gu Beiyue was as meticulous as a needle. He had already prepared the ingredients before coming to Clear Breeze Mountain, specially making a pill that was convenient to ingest. Long Fei Yi passed it to Han Yunxi and said seriously, "Be careful. Sister-in-law, North Moon and I came from the cliff and saw an old man at the entrance of the stone room. He died from bleeding from his scalp. Did you poison him to death?" Tang Li asked seriously. Although Gu Beiyue always referred to him as Sect Master Tang out of respect, he had directly called Gu Beiyue by his name a long time ago. "Haosen? Bleeding from his scalp?" Han Yunxi was surprised. Bai Yanqing should have killed him himself, right? "My poison is fatal, but it's not enough to cause him to bleed from his scalp. This Bai Yanqing has even killed his own subordinates. Is there anyone in this world that he can treat kindly?" Gu Beiyue was angered. "I'm locked up in that stone room and I'm even hiding forth young Miss Ren. Let's find Ning Jing and Xiao Yu quickly before going to find her. We have to send the three of them out first." Han Yunxi said seriously. "Xiao Yu and Ning Jing were locked up in my stone room before. If Bai Yanqing wanted to lock up the two of them, they should be around the stone room. Can't be too far away." However, those two voices earlier. The two shouts rang out from two different directions. Clearly, Su Xiaoyu and Ning Jing had both been taken away from where they were originally locked up. Tang Li looked at the hole that Gu had just fallen into, then glanced at the stone room. He quickly pointed to the right and said seriously, "The path of the secret passage is parallel to this path. We can't go down, so why don't we search along this path first?" Although no one noticed it, Han Yunxi could clearly see that Tang Li was becoming more mature each time. She really hoped that they could quickly find Ning Jing and that Ning Jing wouldn't get hurt again. She believed that no matter how mature Tang Li became, as long as he saw Ning Jing, he would still return to his previous self and make Ning Jing laugh. Until there was no better way, they could only follow Tang Li's instructions. A complicated look flashed past Long Fei Ye's eyes. He waited for news from the entrance of the cave. Since Bai Yanqing knew that Gu was immortal, he would definitely be afraid of them. Perhaps he would escape. As long as Bai Yanqing escaped, the large group of people outside would be able to stop him for at least a few hours. Su Donglin would immediately find a way to send the news in. He had even prepared the explosives. Once Bai Yanqing escaped, he would ask Su Donglin to blow up the entrance of the cave. With such a loud noise, they would definitely be able to hear it from inside the mountain. As long as Bai Yanqing escaped with the hostages, it would be much easier for them to rescue them. Long Fei Yi was pondering this problem when he suddenly remembered the shout just now. He was in a hurry to rescue them and didn't think carefully. Now that he thought about it, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. He stopped and said seriously, "Tang Li, shout. The louder the better." Chapter 1132. Long Fei Yi wanted to shout at Tang Li? Everyone was puzzled. Tang Li also had a suspicious look on his face. "Brother, what are you trying to do? Using this method wouldn't attract Bai Yanqing. It would only make Bai Yanqing hide further away. Don't talk nonsense. Shout." Long Fei Yi urged impatiently. Tang Li shouted, "Ah," and even dragged out the last syllable. Han Yunxi and the others covered their ears, but Long Fei Yi listened attentively. After shouting, Tang Li looked at Long Fei Yi and seemed to have remembered something. He immediately turned around and ran back to the stone room. When Long Fei Yi and the others caught up, Tang Li was already shouting in the stone room. His voice was very loud, even louder than the first time. Even so, the volume didn't seem to be enough to travel far. It could only be heard nearby. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue weren't stupid. They quickly understood what Long Fei Yi meant. They were in a hurry to save people earlier, so they didn't realize this. Now that they thought about it, it was really strange. Even if Ning Jing's voice was twice as loud as Tang Li's, if she shouted in the stone room, her voice might not have traveled that far, right? Han Yunxi remembered that it took her a lot of time to get here. This proved that she wasn't close to Ning Jing. Could it be that Ning Jing isn't here? But it sounds like the voice is coming from the stone room? Gu Beiwei asked curiously. Tang Li frowned and pondered. Soon he exclaimed, I get it. He pulled out his sword and looked for a mechanism on the ceiling as he explained, Ning Jing should be at the top of the stone room. I remember reading in a book about mechanisms that some mazes use special structures and sound amplification stones to transmit sound. In special positions, normal sounds will be amplified and even affect the judgment of the people in the maze. Han Yunxi was surprised by his words. There were plenty of sound amplifiers and silencers in the modern world, but she never expected Cloud Realm Continent to have such a non-electronic design. Sure enough, there were many strange things in ancient times, and the ancient people were smarter than the modern people. Brother, we might have been deceived. Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu might have been together all along. It's at the top of the maze. Tang Li was very excited. Every time he found a clue that could save Ning Jing, he was full of hope. Although his hopes were dashed every time, he never gave up. Long Fei Yi also raised his sword and helped Tang Li knock on the ceiling to look for the mechanism. Gu looked at Tang Li and suddenly realized that this fellow wasn't simple after finding so many hidden mechanisms. Tang Li really wasn't simple. Ever since he was young, he was much more interested in the design of mechanisms and secret passageways than he was in the design of hidden weapons. Because the two had many similarities, he learned the art of mechanisms very quickly. He could understand even the most complicated and obscure ancient text. Tang Li had never encountered a mechanism that he couldn't find in his life. Soon enough, he touched one of the mechanisms. Brother, all of you get out of the way. Go to the left and be careful of hidden weapons on the right. He looked back with a serious expression. Looking at Tang Li like this, Han Yunxi couldn't help but feel hopeful. She believed that Tang Li would definitely be able to find Ning Jing. As soon as Tang Li activated the mechanism, multiple hidden darts flew from the ceiling to the right side of the room. They were so fast that it was impossible to guard against them. If it weren't for Tang Li, who knew how much danger they would have to go through. TSK amazing. Gu was never stingy with his praise. Tang Li turned back and chuckled. Of course. He touched the mechanism again, and the two stone slabs above his head slowly began to move. When he looked up, he saw that there was a hidden passage with no end in sight. Tang Li immediately wanted to fly up, but Long Fei Yi stopped him. Long Fei Yi wanted to go up, but Gu beat him to it. It was safer for him to be the vanguard. Without needing Tang Li to explain, Gu flew up and attached himself to the stone wall. He shouted down softly, but unexpectedly his voice was amplified. Gu, quick, look around. Is there a red stone nearby? Tang Li quickly said. Gu lit a match and looked around. He chuckled and said, it's not just one, it's a circle. We'll bring them out later. The stones around him were all red and felt very strange to the touch. They were the amplifying stones that Tang Li mentioned. Gu whispered something to the stones and his voice was amplified immediately. It was louder than before. I guessed right. Ning Jing must be up there. Tang Li was overjoyed. If it were any other time, he would have immediately dug up those amplifying stones. Those were all treasures. However, no matter how good the treasures were, they could not compare to his precious Ning Jing. Brother, I've seen this setup before. This secret passage is very high, at least 10 stories high. Let's go up quickly. Bai Yanqing might still be down there. Tang Li said anxiously. Gu, go up. Long Fei Yi immediately urged. Gu did not dare to delay and flew up. Gu Beiwei followed closely behind. Tang Li was in the middle and Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were still at the back. Bai Yanqing might still be down there in the secret passage. He definitely did not expect them to find this passage. As long as they could find Ning Jing before Bai Yanqing, it would be too easy to save her. The four of them went up. They were nervous but hopeful at the same time, especially Tang Li. The corners of his mouth were always upturned. He even forgot to be nervous. As long as they could find Ning Jing, everything would be fine. As long as they could find her and see her. There was no need for too many words. Gu tried his best to rush up again and again, hoping to be faster. After all, his speed determined the speed of the people behind him. Tang Li was the slowest. Gu Beiyue waited for Tang Li and pulled him up to fly up. Han Yunxi was led by Long Fei Yi. They quickly passed through the secret passage and arrived at a stone room. They came out from the right wall of the stone room and saw that the stone room was empty. There was no one in sight. There was also a hole in the left wall of the stone room. There was a slanted passage in the hole and they could not see the bottom. There was no doubt that these two holes and the passage below were used for sound amplification. They did not guess wrong. Ning Jing and Little Yu had been together all this time. The sound they heard was not the original sound, but a sound that was amplified in different directions. Tang Li was disappointed again. However, he no longer needed Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's comfort. Seeing that the stone door was open, he was the first to rush out and saw that there was a passage outside the stone room. Han Yunxi was about to speak, but Tang Li did not chase after them. Instead, he turned back. He did not say a word and immediately began to check the entire stone room. In the end, he came to a conclusion. There are only 3 exits in this stone room. 2 sound amplification passages and 1 door. They might have escaped through the door or they might have escaped through another sound amplification passage. Which one do you choose? Long Fei Yi asked. Tang Li looked at everyone with a serious face. He was obviously hesitating. After a while he said, the sound amplification passage. Long Fei Yi knocked on his head. Impossible. Let's go out and look for them quick. Tang Li looked calm but he was anxious. The sound amplification passage was the most unsafe. If they could not control Little Yu and Ning Jing well, the 2 of them would shout a few times inside and everyone in the maze would hear them. Tang Li did not understand but he did not have time to think about it. As long as it was his brother's judgment, it could not be wrong. The group did not delay. They immediately went out and chased along the passageway. Han Yunxi and the rest did not take the wrong path. At this moment, Ning Jing and Little Yu were being escorted in the direction of the exit. Although this level of secret passageway was not a part of the maze, the route was very complicated. There were several intersections that led to different directions. Although they would not go far if they took the wrong path and would only meet with a dead end, it would take a lot of time to turn back. The most depressing thing was that these intersections were not organized at all. There was no pattern at all. Even if someone was familiar with the secret passageway, they would not be able to take the right path. There were only 2 ways to save time and avoid detours. One was to know the route and the other was to rely on luck. Han Yunxi and the rest could only rely on luck. The 2 men in black who were escorting Ning Jing and Little Yu knew the route. They had just received their master's order to bring these 2 hostages to the exit as soon as possible. They did not know what was going on. They only knew that their master wanted to take the hostages and escape from this place. Ning Jing and Little Yu's hands were restrained. They walked in the middle while the 2 guards walked on either side of them. Little Yu deliberately bumped into Ning Jing several times. Ning Jing understood what she meant. Although they did not know what Bai Yanqing wanted to do, they guessed that the reinforcements should have arrived. Otherwise, Bai Yanqing would not force them to shout like that. Now there were only 2 guards escorting them. Bai Yanqing was not around and this was the best time for them to escape. Ning Jing did not have much strength and her martial arts were very weak. Although she was helpless, she could only pin her hopes on Little Yu. Su Xiaoyu walked and suddenly stopped. You have a stomachache? Oh, stop putting on an act. Go. The guard immediately reprimanded her. No, my stomach hurts. Su Xiaoyu did not leave. Instead she knelt down. The guard did not care where she was in pain as long as she didn't die. The guard lifted her up and carried her on his shoulder before escorting Ning Jing forward. Hurry up. Su Xiaoyu hung upside down on the guard's shoulder. That pair of big eyes flashed with a trace of craftiness and a dark needle silently emerged from her mouth. If Bai Yanqing was around, she would absolutely not do such a stupid thing like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. But if there were only 2 guards around, even if it was a stupid thing, she must take a gamble. He suddenly spat out the dark needle. The dark needle did not shoot at the guard who was carrying her but shot at the neck of the guard who was escorting Ning Jing. What is it? The guard was shocked and reached out to touch it. Just at this moment, Ning Jing suddenly turned around and fiercely knocked the guard to one side before running forward. The guard who was knocked away was on his last breath. He was not injured by Ning Jing but by Su Xiaoyu's poison needle. If there was no antidote, he would die in a while. This guard was of course a poison expert, but unfortunately, Su Xiaoyu's poison needle was obtained from Han Yunxi. She had been keeping it until now so that she could use it on her blade. Not to mention this guard, even if Bai Yanqing was here, he might not be able to detoxify this poison. The guard who was carrying Su Xiaoyu was not someone who was easy to deal with. He was afraid that Su Xiaoyu would poison him again, so the first thing he did was to throw Su Xiaoyu towards Ningjing. At the same time, he immediately shot out more than 10 poison needles. Chapter 1133. The black-robed guard's strength was too great, and even though Su Xiaoyu wanted to turn her head or land, there was no way for her to do so. After she was thrown out, she crashed heavily onto Ningjing's body and fell onto the ground together with Ningjing, falling quite a distance away. Following that were 10 over poison needles, and the both of them had no time to evade. In the nick of time, Ningjing suddenly flipped over and protected Su Xiaoyu in her arms. At this moment 3 to 4 poison needles hit Ningjing's back, and the moment she was hit, Ningjing thought of her daughter and also thought of Bai Yuqiao. Su Xiaoyu was greatly shocked and hurriedly struggled. She didn't even bother to check what kind of poison Ningjing had been hit by, and only hurriedly took out a pill and gave it to Ningjing. This pill was something that she had asked for from Han Yunxi. If it was just a normal poison, taking this pill would be able to delay the time of the poison's effect, but if it was a powerful poison, it would be totally ineffective. She didn't know if it would be effective, so she could only give it to Ningjing. She didn't have the time to think as she pulled Ningjing and used her light body technique to run forward. Because the black-robed man had caught up with them. "Sister Jing, think of your daughter. You must hang on. My master and the rest must have come to save us, and they might even be here soon. You must hang on," Su Xiaoyu said as she ran with all her might. She didn't have the time to look at Ningjing, and she didn't dare to look. As long as she pulled Ningjing and ran forward, as long as Ningjing could still run with her, the poison shouldn't have acted up and they should be fine. Ningjing's lips had turned black. Although the poison didn't act up immediately, but her condition was really not good. Although she had been running madly with Su Xiaoyu, her feet didn't seem to belong to her and she couldn't feel them at all. In her mind there was only her daughter's tender face, only her daughter's cries that she had to recall every day, only Tang Li, that young Master Tang who stood at the entrance of one commerce hall many years ago. Outside the door the mountains were as dark as ink, and Tang Li was a touch of white in the ink. That day his gentle smile was fixed in the ink painting, fixed in her mind. That day in the picturesque scenery, Tang Li turned back to talk to her and said affectionately to her, "Jing, wait for me to marry you." As if it had happened yesterday, many years had passed in the blink of an eye. Time. "Tang Li, when we first met you said you were called Chongli. Were we destined to be apart for the rest of our lives from the day we first met?" The two of them were running with all their might. Who would have thought that there would be a fire in front of them? After a while they found that there was a cliff in front of them. There was a cliff and a fire. What was going on? The man in black slowed down. There were only 2 entrances and exits to this underground palace, on both sides of the maze. The cliff in front wasn't an exit, but a dead end in the truest sense. Su Xiaoyu had no other choice but to continue forward. Soon she and Ningjing stood on the cliff and there was a huge fire pit below them. Su Xiaoyu didn't dare to get too close. She pulled Ningjing tightly and immediately reached out to the approaching man in black. "Your companion's antidote. Let us go and I'll give it to you. Otherwise I'll throw the antidote down now." Coldly the man in black smiled and didn't answer. He approached step by step. Su Xiaoyu didn't want to retreat at all. She pulled Ningjing and suddenly rushed towards the man in black. The man in black blasted them away with a palm. Su Xiaoyu and Ningjing immediately flew out. However, just as they were about to fall, the man in black grabbed Su Xiaoyu's hand in time. Ningjing grabbed Su Xiaoyu's other hand and hung it in midair. The man in black grabbed Su Xiaoyu's wrist with one hand and pried open her tightly clenched fingers with the other to find the antidote. Su Xiaoyu had been thrown out previously and had suffered serious internal injuries. Now that she was hit by such a palm, she almost fainted. But she still held on. If she didn't hold on, she and Ningjing would be buried in the sea of fire. At this moment Han Yunxi had already detected the presence of the poison. Someone is poisoned, not just one person. It should be nearby. Han Yunxi stopped and said seriously, "It must be Ningjing and the rest. It must be." Tang Li was excited. However, at this moment they were facing a fork in the road. The direction Han Yunxi checked was a wall in the middle of the two forks. Let's split up. Even if we meet Bai Yanqing, try to find a way to delay him. Long Fei Yi said seriously. Gu Beiyue, Tang Li and Gu walked together towards the right fork. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi walked towards the left fork. Both groups of people rushed forward. However, after Tang Li and the rest ran for a while, they found another fork in the road. They didn't know where to go. Gu Beiyue had no choice but to go back to find Han Yunxi. Tang Li was so anxious that he punched the wall several times. He was about to go crazy. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi also came to a fork in the road. The detoxification system reminded her that the direction was still a wall. Helpless, they could only walk together and try the right path first. They didn't know that Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu were in a dangerous situation at this moment. However, they knew that this was a very rare clue and they couldn't miss it. The black-clothed man was using all his strength to pry open Su Xiaoyu's 5 fingers. Su Xiaoyu secretly used all her strength. She didn't discuss this with Ning Jing and she couldn't discuss it with Ning Jing. She only said to Ning Jing in her heart, "Sister Jing, this is our life and death battle." After saying that, she suddenly grabbed the black-clothed bodyguard's 2 fingers and used all her strength to pull them up. Her mouth reached the black-clothed bodyguard's wrist and she bit down hard. This was the last poison she had hidden on her body. She had originally wanted to spit out the poison needle and bite him while she was at it. Unfortunately, her speed wasn't fast enough and before she could bite, she was flung away. After biting down, the black-clothed bodyguard suddenly became ruthless and wanted to fling Su Xiaoyu away. Su Xiaoyu bit down hard and refused to let go. Suddenly, the black-clothed bodyguard stopped. His face turned black and he suddenly fell towards the abyss. "Ah!" Su Xiaoyu screamed and immediately let go. Her hand slid down the black-clothed bodyguard's body and she managed to grab hold of the cliff in time. While the black-clothed bodyguard's head fell down from behind her and Ning Jing. So close, but they weren't out of danger yet. Su Xiaoyu had only grabbed hold of a small corner of the cliff and she was already unable to bear her own weight. What's more, her other hand was still holding on to Ning Jing. Her fingers were obviously moving downwards bit by bit. She knew that if she didn't think of a solution soon, she and Ning Jing would both die. Su Xiaoyu asked, "Sister Jing, are you all right?" Ning Jing's poison was acting up and she was feeling terrible. She knew that if she didn't let go, she would drag Su Xiaoyu down with her into the sea of fire. She said, "Little you let go." "I'm not letting go," Su Xiaoyu said seriously. "Silly child, Sister Jing's poison is acting up and she can't hold on any longer. It's futile for you to save me. Let go," Ning Jing said helplessly. She had always thought that Su Xiaoyu was a vicious and mean child, but she didn't expect her to be so righteous. "No, Sister Jing, the poison acted up just now and you can still hold on until now. This means that the poison won't kill you so quickly. You just have to hold on until my master and the others find you and you'll be fine," Su Xiaoyu said seriously. "Silly, I can't hold on any longer. If you don't let go, both of us will die." Ning Jing was fierce. "Let go. I have a way. Sister Jing, hold on to my waist and I'll be able to hold on to the wall with my other hand. Believe me, I'll definitely be able to hold on tightly. You can climb up from my body. You can definitely do it. Hurry up." Su Xiaoyu wasn't joking. This was a way. However, Ning Jing laughed. She didn't waste any more words with Su Xiaoyu. She reached out to pry Su Xiaoyu's hand away. If she really did that, Su Xiaoyu wouldn't be able to hold on and Su Xiaoyu would be the one to fall. Su Xiaoyu panicked when her little fingers were pried away. She hurriedly advised, "Sister Jing, you still have a daughter and a husband. I have nothing. I'm just an orphan. It's okay if I die. I should have died long ago. If it wasn't for my master who saved me, I wouldn't be able to live until now. Being able to live for a few more years can be considered a blessing to me." When these words came out, Ning Jing cried. Ning Jing really wanted to tell little Yu, that she wasn't an orphan. She had an elder sister. Her elder sister was the one who saved everyone by Yu Qiao. But she couldn't say it. She and Ning Qing had promised by Yu Qiao that they wouldn't reveal this secret. "Little Yu, you're not an orphan. You still have us." Ning Jing choked out. "Sister Jing, I can't hold on any longer. Hurry up and come up, hurry," Su Xiaoyu urged. You still have to take care of your daughter and husband. I don't have anything to do. My master has many people to take care of her. Don't fight with me. Little you still have a long way to go. How old are you? You still have a long way to go. You still have to get married and have children. Let go. Ning Jing cried loudly. Little Yu would never know that she and Ning Qing had promised by Yu Qiao that they would definitely save little Yu and protect her to grow up safely. When little Yu got married in the future, they would prepare a generous dowry for her and she would get married in a grand manner. She and Ning Qing couldn't break their promise to others. The D clan also couldn't break their promise to others. Ning Jing hardened her heart and pried open all of Su Xiaoyu's fingers. She held her wrist and said seriously, Little Yu, promise me one thing. When my daughter grows up in the future, you will be her elder sister. Take good care of her and protect her to grow up safely. When she gets married in the future, help me prepare her dowry. It must be a grand occasion. It must be. After saying this, Ning Jing resolutely let go of her hand and she fell down just like that. Sister Jing, don't. Su Xiaoyu cried and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, no matter how loudly she shouted, it was useless. Her vision was all blurred by tears. Gradually, she couldn't see Ning Jing's figure that was getting smaller and smaller. She also didn't see that just as Ning Jing was about to enter the sea of fire, a figure appeared out of nowhere and swept past. Ning Jing's figure also disappeared. At this moment, Han Yunxi and the rest had just rushed out from a fork in the road and saw the cliff ahead. When they heard Su Xiaoyu's cries, they all rushed over like crazy. But it was too late. They didn't even see Ning Jing's figure. They only saw Su Xiaoyu hanging in midair and her little hand sliding down bit by bit. Han Yunxi hurriedly pulled little Yu up. Little Yu immediately wailed loudly, Master, Sister Jing has fallen down. Tang Li seemed to have been struck by lightning as he stood rooted to the ground in a daze. Chapter 1134. Tang Li stood rooted to the ground in a daze. His face was facing the scorching flames and little Yu's cries lingered in his ears. Sister Jing fell down. He really wanted to try harder and stay calm again. However, the cries and the words, Sister Jing, in the cries were like a demon that lingered in his ears, trapping his eyes, ears and heart. Sister Jing fell down. Everyone looked into the abyss and saw that it was very deep. The abyss was filled with raging flames. Once someone fell down, how could they survive? Han Yunxi looked at the fire pit and then looked at Tang Li. She couldn't accept this for a moment and her mind went blank. The detoxification system had long lost its notification. She didn't know if it was because they were too far away, or if the fire had burned both the person and the poison away. Han Yunxi unconsciously held little Yu tightly, so tightly that little Yu's hand was about to break. Little Yu didn't feel the pain at all. She kept crying and crying, calling out Sister Jing, as if Ning Jing was really her sister. Gu and Gu Beiyue also stared blankly at the raging flames. They always knew that it wouldn't be easy to save the hostages this time, but they really didn't expect this outcome. She was gone. They hadn't even seen her for the last time. She was gone. Gu had always been a simple-minded person. At this moment, when he saw Tang Li's wooden expression, he suddenly felt terrible. He didn't want to look anymore, so he walked to the side and squatted down. Gu Beiyue was a doctor, so he was most used to seeing death. He pitied any patient, but he felt helpless when it came to death. However, in this short period of time, Tang Li, who was full of hope and spirit, instantly dimmed. This was the first time he felt heart take over death. Long Fei Yi lowered his eyes. He walked in front of Tang Li and pulled him into his arms. In the past, Tang Li did not throw himself on his shoulder and cry like he did when he was young. Tang Li was still standing there motionlessly. His eyes were empty as he stared at the raging fire in the abyss. He tried hard to recall the last time he saw Ning Jing. What she looked like, what she was wearing, what kind of hairstyle she had, and what she had said. That was in the three-way black market. She was wearing a loose dress. At that time she was already pregnant. Unfortunately, he didn't know. At that time she said, "Men, chop off the young master's right hand." The last thing he said to her was, "Ning Jing, you win." He had no choice but to undo the bracelets that bound the two of them together, not allowing them to be more than 10 steps away from each other. "Ning Jing, if I knew what you were thinking, I would never undo the bracelets even if I lost my life, much less my right hand." Tang Li was thinking about the first time they met when Ning Jing was disguised as a man. At that time he didn't know who she was and she didn't know who he was either. He lied to her and said, "My name is Chongli. I'm a disciple of Shuangqing Mountain." She repeated it several times. Finally she said, "That's not a good name. It's too sad." He was deliberately mystifying, saying that all encounters were long parting. Today's encounter was fate. They might not meet again in this lifetime, so it was a long parting. Miss Farewell. However, she stopped him and said, "Come up. I'll give you a ride. Then it won't be a long parting." Thinking of this, Tang Li was already crying silently. "Ning Jing, if I knew this day would come, I'd rather not get on your carriage. I'd rather pass by you and miss you forever. Is that the only way I won't be sad?" Tang Li was still thinking about that day when he went to Wan Commerce Hall to marry Ning Jing. He flirted with the maidservant outside her room. When she closed the door and refused to come out, he blocked the door and warned her, "Ouyang Ning Jing, if you don't come out, I'll block the door and not leave. I Tang Li will only marry you, Ning Jing." She even forgot to wear the red veil and rushed out of the room. That was the first time he saw her dressed as a woman. Her hair was tall and she had beautiful eyebrows. Her eyes were clear and bright and her lips were red. She was as bright as spring and as beautiful as the autumn moon. She was a feast for the eyes. That time he was mesmerized. For the first time he realized that she was actually such a beautiful person. As Tang Li thought about it, his face was already covered in tears. Long Fei Ye's shoulder was already wet from his tears. Long Fei Yi hugged his neck, wanting him to lean on his shoulder and give him some comfort. However, Tang Li pushed away Long Fei Ye's hand and said lightly, "Let me be alone. I want to be alone." Be alone. This word made everyone look over and they all felt uncomfortable. However, Tang Li didn't react at all. He walked to the wall and squatted down with his head in his hands. He kept muttering to himself, "I want to be alone. Let me be alone." Tang Li's face was still full of tears, but his expression clearly showed that he was confused and not sad at all. He was like a different person from before. Han Yunxi immediately sensed that something was wrong. She quickly walked over and squatted in front of Tang Li. "Tang Li, what's wrong with you?" Tang Li ignored her and kept muttering to himself. "I want to be quiet. I want to be quiet. I want to be alone. I want to be alone." Why did he look so confused? Why did he look like he was in a daze? Han Yunxi became more and more uneasy. She turned back to look at Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue quickly came over to take his pulse, but he couldn't see through his illness. Gu Beiyue was very uneasy. He shook his head at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was about to cry. She grabbed Tang Li's hands and asked, "Tang Li, what's wrong with you? Tell me, who is Jingjing?" "Jingjing." Tang Li muttered, "Jingjing? I want to be alone. I just want to be alone. Don't disturb me, okay?" Han Yunxi cried. She turned her head away, but she couldn't help crying out loud. "Tang Li, I want to be alone too. I really want to be alone. Tang Li, how can you not know who Jingjing is?" Suddenly Gu, who was squatting at the side, jumped up and took out Immerse's sword. "I'm going to kill Bai Yanqing. I'm going to cut him into pieces." Long Fei Yi looked at the dazed Tang Li and slowly clenched his fists. How could he take this lying down if he didn't catch Bai Yanqing? How could he take revenge? "Gu Beiyue, take Tang Li and Su Xiaoyu out first." Long Fei Yi said. Ning Jing was dead and Su Xiaoyu was back. Now they didn't have any hostages in Bai Yanqing's hands, so they were no longer afraid of him. Little Yuer said with a choked voice, "I heard from the guards that Bai Yanqing would go to the cliff exit of the maze. The guards wanted to take me and Sister Jing to find him." Sob sob. "If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have escaped. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for acting on my own initiative and overestimating myself." No one would blame Su Xiaoyu. Although they didn't say anything, they were all blaming themselves in their hearts. If they had arrived earlier, things wouldn't have turned out like this. "Your Highness, it's not easy to get out of here," Gu Beiyue said helplessly. Long Fei Yi glanced at him and didn't answer. Instead he walked to the dazed Tang Li's side. He steeled his heart and knocked Tang Li out with a palm strike before saying, "Come with me." Ever since Long Fei Yi discovered that he had entered the honeycomb maze, he had marked every path and every fork he had taken. Even if he forgot which path he had taken, as long as he found the mark, he could still return to his original place. When he returned to his original place, he could determine how far he was from the cave exit and find a way out of the maze. There were rules to follow in the honeycomb maze. The place he had been at wasn't far from the exit. As long as he followed the rules and walked a few rounds, he could basically get out. Gu Beiyue carried the unconscious Tang Li while Han Yunxi held Su Xiaoyu's hand. The group followed Long Fei Yi back to the original secret room. Han Yunxi thought of fourth young Miss Ren and said, "Wait, I'll go find fourth young Miss Ren. Beiyue, you can send her out together." Han Yunxi was also a meticulous person. Not only did she poison fourth young Miss Ren, she also marked the path. Following the mark, the detoxification system notified them not long after. When they found fourth young Miss Ren, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked like a little rabbit. As soon as she saw Han Yunxi, she was so excited that she almost screamed. "Shoo!" Han Yunxi quickly fed her the antidote and covered her mouth. Bai Yanqing must have snuck to the cliff exit from the secret passage below. Whether he had arrived or not, they still couldn't expose their whereabouts for now. Sending the hostages out was the most important thing. Fourth young Miss Ren immediately nodded, indicating that she knew to keep quiet and not attract any enemies. As soon as she walked out of the secret room, she saw Gu Beiyue. Academy head Beiyue. Fourth young Miss Ren was pleasantly surprised. Gu Beiyue was as calm as still water. He only nodded. "You've worked hard." He was always like this. He looked polite but kept people at arm's length. Leaving aside fourth young Miss Ren, there were plenty of women in Medical City who openly admired him and secretly adored this academy head, this gentleman. But no one dared to be presumptuous, much less get close to him. He was like a holy god high above the snowy mountains that could only be looked at from afar. With him in Medical City, they were satisfied. "Gu, you go out with them as well. Yunxi and I will go find Bai Yanqing first. I'll leave marks along the way so you can follow them when you come over," Long Fei Yi said seriously. With Gu and Gu Beiyue escorting the three hostages, it was enough. Without any worries, he and Han Yunxi could deal with Bai Yanqing together. Long Fei Yi gave Gu Beiyue a compass and instructed, "Go straight down this path. There'll be a mark at every fork. Go to the one with the mark. Go straight to the one without a mark. Go straight to the west. There are no forks in the maze, only 3. If you take one, you'll only have 2 choices. Remember, go west until you reach the first fork and turn right. Then turn left at the second fork. Keep going left and right. You should be able to get out before long. Leave marks along the way. If you can't get out, go back the way you came and turn left at the first fork. Then turn right at the second fork. Keep going until you reach the exit." Long Fei Yi listed out a few ideas that confused Gu, but Gu Beiyue understood and memorized. "All right. Your Highness, Princess, be careful. 7th young master and I will be back soon," Gu Beiyue said seriously. Thus they split up into 2 groups, one to the west and one to the east. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.